Look at that little.
Sorry. I'll take care of, that's me.
This is a part of the. Very Star Wars.
Ms. Armstrong, you're here on the Euclid Library case, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so that your name wasn't listed as the treasurer, and so just wanted to make sure that was the case. So. I think it is. Sure. With them, so every do basically do her first. Oh, and she. I don't know what her role is. She. You can follow library. You know, what is it? I think I'll follow is a tiny, but she's the.
Okay.
Go from there. I think so.
This time I'd like to call the May 4th, 2023 meeting of the Ohio Elections Commission to order. It is 10:14.
I will, the first thing we'll ask Mr. Stouter, if you wouldn't mind to be sworn in, and ceremonial as much as anything, considering you've seen every bit of paperwork that possible that the governor we sent to you. You raise your right hand. I, Peter Stouter.
I, Peter Stalberg,
Promise and swear
promise to swear
to support the Constitution of the United States,
support the Constitution of the United States,
Constitution and laws of the state of Ohio,
Constitution and laws of the state of Ohio,
and to faithfully discharge my duties
and to faithfully discharge my duties
as a member of the Ohio Elections Commission,
as a member of the Ohio Elections
which
Commission,
I have been appointed by the governor, Michael DeWine.
which I have been appointed to by the governor, Michael DeWine.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the commission.
Okay, so can we have the roll call, please?
Mr. Lyle. Present. Ms. Hagan.
Present.
Mr. Knight.
Here.
Mr. Polkey. Present. Mr. Stoutenberg.
Present.
Vice Chair Tavares.
Present.
Chair Kaufman.
Present.
All members of the commission are present.
First order of business is to approve the regular meeting minutes of April 27th, 2023. We've all had a chance to review. Any questions, corrections, comments?
There has been one minor change that I added to the commission based on a comment from Mr. Knight yesterday. It's in the other business area. It's a very minor change. I think it's in the I added the grand total of 2 words. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the bottom of the first paragraph under other business. It's on the far right hand side. It starts a further consideration of what may be the right mix between two positions currently incorporated in the position Mr. Richter occupies. I added the words "was held" to complete that sentence. That's the only change from what was previously circulated. So anyway, that's the minutes that are in front of you right at the moment. So I would encourage approval of the minutes if the commission is otherwise.
Madam Chair, I have a few comments.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I don't feel more strong about the second one first, but I think we should consider at least differentiating between full-time members and alternate members. And I'll give you an example. The city director just called the roll and said all members were present. That's really not true. Mr. Caraway is not present, right? And on days like this, you could say, well, a member's a member, which is a paraphrase of what Mr. Richter explained his view is when he and I communicated about this. I agree with that, but what happens when perhaps this hearing gets extended And in a future meeting, Commissioner Caraway is here, has to step out. Mr. Stoutberg's here and steps in just for that, right? Now it gets really kind of messy. And, in anticipation of that, since the minutes are the official approved record, I think we should at least consider whether or not we should have some level of differentiation in the minutes between a full-time member and a alternate member. I don't feel strongly about it, but I think it's at least worth discussing more for the future circumstances where it could be confusing.
Or you may need to check in the replacement member for attendance when they arrive or something, so they're both on the record.
There are lots of, I don't even know what they are, all the potential issues that could come, right? But are we gonna have members present if we have 3 alternates all listed and then in and out? And how are we gonna explain that without it being really confusing is my concern.
I think it's worth noting. I don't know, Mr. Richter, if you have
Yeah,
this is
Mr. Knight,
all new to everybody.
and to me as well, obviously, Mr. Knight raised that with me yesterday, and I said to him, yeah, it's probably a worthwhile discussion topic to have, because it's like, this is new to me as well. And I certainly understand and respect not only your position, but, the challenges that we're not facing today or last week, but we will face in the future.
That's where my concern is about this particular one, right?
Yeah.
But here's the precedence for what we're gonna do going forward.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't have, and certainly for me, it's not a problem to, let's say, looking at last week's minute or last week's minutes, under Mr. Kolke's name, I could, after his name, I could put, dash alternate or something along those lines to identify, with this meeting, I could do the same thing for Mr. Stoutberg. And I was figuring that, like I said, it's not gonna happen today or next week. At the next meeting though, where I anticipate Mr. Caraway being present, Mr. Stoutberg as well. I had anticipated in terms of reflecting when someone steps in, steps out, that could be reflected. But, in terms of where it lists members present, and certainly I think that, wouldn't be a big deal to reflect the differentiation between 2 levels of membership.
And just think about our next meeting. Do we not mark Commissioner Caraway as absent in the next set of minutes, right?
Oh, yeah, no, I was gonna say, I think that considering he is expected to be he is the permanent member, and Mr. Stoutberg is here because of his absence, his need to recuse from the meeting because he had a previous engagement. I was going to reflect that in minutes, and I think I would certainly ask the commission to excuse Mr. Caraway from the cause at this point. So I was anticipating putting that to minutes, but that's.
I
I
don't
would,
feel strongly about it. I just want to make sure that we are all comfortable with whatever we choose.
Yeah.
So it's just the right precedent. I'm sorry to interrupt.
no, you're fine. I was just gonna say, I might exercise caution on labeling them as an alternate when they're operating in the full capacity once sitting and marked as attending, because it may signify that they're a lesser when they have equal voting power. Just a thought. Obviously, legislators send us something that big. We're shocked. So we're now working out the details, but.
Yeah.
Mr. Richter, I totally agree. I think we definitely need to differentiate in some way, however we decide to do that, because it is going to be confusing in the future.
I guess I would, what I would encourage, as I indicated, if you look at the heading there, where we have members present, and looking at last week's meeting, at that point, I can put, like David Kolke dash alternate. And that identifies him in that position, but then the rest of the way through, when since he moved either seconded various things, he's just listed as someone who is taking action as he is authorized to do. And so, I think, to me, that's probably the best way of differentiating and identifying appropriately. And that's what my suggestion would be. And so if that's okay with the commission, then I would encourage, as it relates to these minutes, whoever makes the motion to approve them is merely, indicating that these minutes are approved with the addition of an identification of Mr. Volpe as an alternate. Because otherwise, I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with it, but I think that in just listing them, like I said, and looking at potentially at the next meeting where we'll be bouncing back and forth, I can indicate within the minutes,
Right.
Mr. Caraway was obligated to recuse, Mr. Stauber stepped in at this point. And so I can differentiate when that occurred within the minutes. And in the heading, we would just have it listed as, as an attendee and what their status is. Yeah, I guess you almost say legal, because that is the role that they are filling.
So moved. Madam Chair.
I still have another set of questions with these minutes.
For the
So this I feel more strongly about, and actually have this is concern. So, minutes are meant to be the approved legal truth of a meeting. And, in my private sector roles, council advises us to not give specifics, but to be general and vague. And, even if you look at sort of the first thing, the plenary review, it just says commission members ask questions about the matter. It doesn't talk about what the specific questions were. And our other business section goes very specifically to, who said what and kind of, what the specific issue points were. It's very specific. And, when the reason for being vague is so that, members of the board can kind of speak freely and not give opinions, but not be held to them per se. But when you put it here, even though all of this is true, it just reaches a level of specificity that is the legal sort of synopsis of what we did. I would be much more comfortable if it was more broad and vague, as we do in earlier issues, than getting to this level of specifics to be brief.
Along those lines, may I ask, or live streamed, and she's also transcribing the notes word for word. Is that not also a public document if requested?
Yes.
Yeah, the minutes, again, as I understand them, is this board putting its stamp on the synopsis of truth. It is different than
Sure.
what you described. I understand it's public meetings and sunshine laws and all that stuff. But they don't require that we approve minutes to this level of specifics, and we don't in other areas of this, even these.
I guess my comment to that, another board I sit on, we just had a discussion about someone's position and shifting. We went into executive session in order to cover that, so as to give that person confidentiality. And I agree that I think if it's all recorded in other means, then this could be a little more broad or a little more general. And then I think that gives Mr. Richter a little bit of privacy on what we're discussing as well. So I think I agree 100%. Because obviously we didn't go into executive session because that's usually, for different discussions, but I do think if we're, especially the subject matter, I think it's just important to be mindful of confidentiality and just respectful in this particular subject matter. So I don't know how anyone else feels about that.
Well, most of it's about me, but I'm not offended by it. Typically minutes, it's either you ask for additions or deletions, right? And we're kind of going off of that. So if you haven't, I understand what you're saying, but it would seem appropriate if you have a addition or a deletion, Ernie, that you would offer the language that you were looking for. It seemed to me.
I
I mean, because it seems what I'm hearing is that you're asking for a whole rewrite of the minutes.
No, just
No.
the other business section should be rewritten to, you know, to be more broad and less specific.
You have a
Yes.
suggestion on that, or?
I mean, I haven't gone through the process of doing that because, I just got these yesterday and, I had 101 things to do and
Yeah, no, I'm.
rewriting the minutes and then have the rest of the group say, hey, we think they're fine, would have just been a waste of time. I mean, I guess, I have a little different experience, typically in boards that I'm on, if there are concerns with the minutes, management goes back and rewrites and edits and then represents them at the next meeting for approval. So I guess my experience is different than yours in terms of how this is typically handled. So, I mean, I'm happy to, between now and the next meeting, edit this. I mean, it really comes down to eliminating the specifics and just saying something like questions were asked and answered, or the group had a vibrant discussion. I mean, it's not a rocket science, activity, I could probably do it in 10 minutes, but, I don't want to feel like I'm being empowered by the group to rewrite with the team that's presented unless the whole group wants me to do that.
Let me just interject. I can change them how I want. It's easy enough to do that and essentially, in these written minutes, take out references to individuals, a member did this, a member did that. That's
So the commission discussed.
the
I
commission
mean,
discuss,
you
right?
can go real broad. I mean, like I said, look, the very first one, it says, the group asked questions, commission members asked questions about the matter. Members asked questions about the, about the strategy of the commission. I mean, whatever you want to do, right? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You don't have to get into individuals if you don't want to.
Right. And I can make those changes without a problem. If you want to just table this to the next meeting, and I can go forward from there. That's fine by me. I can make those changes.
I was just gonna make that motion that we table for the next meeting to be rewritten.
can.
Christina seconds. Yeah.
We have a motion that's been duly seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Post same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. Commissioner Barnes, Vice Chair, you had a motion.
Oh, yeah, I should drop the motion.
Okay.
Yeah, you really.
That was,
That's my bad.
okay. So,
Got it?
so
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion that we excuse Commissioner Caraway for good conduct.
Second.
all right, we have a motion that's been duly seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Post same sign. Motion carries with the vote of 7-0 to excuse Commissioner Caraway. Okay, the first order of business is a preliminary review. Mr. Hicks, oh no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
One moment, I apologize. The first case we're gonna hear is a $50 fine category case. It is Friends of Euclid Public Library PAC et al. It is case number 2023 R-058. And we have someone here.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, this is case number 2023 R-058. The Friends of Euclid Public Library were referred to failing to file. They were originally referred to failing to file the annual report. The report was filed on March 8th. A response was submitted to the commission. I've synopsized that and provided it to you in the worksheet. My recommendation to the commission is to find a violation and impose a fine of $50. Primarily because the report was filed about a month and a half late, I guess I'd say. Outside of the 10-day, 2-week period that we kind of unofficially identified as a basis for a good cause finding. We have here today Casey Armstrong. Ms. Armstrong, I'm not sure what your relationship is to either the library or the committee. If you could introduce them, if you want to be sworn, you can make a statement to the commission.
Raise your right hand.
Oh,
Do you swear from the whole truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am the director of the Eagle Public Library, Casey Armstrong. Thank you for hearing from me today. What I'll say is Eagle Public Library is one of 9 independent library systems in Cuyahoga County. We do rely on our Friends of the Library group, who is our volunteer group that raises dollars for the library. And they also have a separate division of the PAC. These are volunteers. The Friendsville Library, the PAC treasurer, Frankie Denby, she alerted the Friends that she was resigning in September 2022. As I'm sure you can understand, it's very difficult to find volunteers. It took them until January 9th to even approve the new volunteer treasurer and deputy treasurer. We were taking that time in January to, let me speak louder, Mike. To get them trained, get them all the information that they needed. And so it truly was an oversight. We just did not see at the bottom that the report was due on January 31st, as we were doing the switching over. On February 1st, I immediately reached out to the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections with the new treasurer, deputy treasurer, to try to make sure we understood what we needed to do. Again, these are volunteers, so it took us some time to make sure they understood what they were signing up to do. They were able to get all the documentation completed and everything turned in, as Mr. Richards said, by March 9th. So we do very much apologize. It was truly, we ran out of time basically as we were trying to get the volunteers onboarded and assured that they were ready to fulfill this new position as deputy treasurer and treasurer. We have never been late in our history of having a PAC. We've had really good volunteers. So I'm a little concerned because it's very hard for us to get volunteers already. So if they feel like they're going to be fined and penalized, it's going to make it that much harder for us to get any type of volunteers to support our PACs and our friends with library groups. So we do apologize. And if we are fined, of course, we'll make sure that the payment is made on time. And I thank you for hearing me today.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions?
I have one question, Madam Chair. Mr. Richter, is this the first violation that we've had?
Yes,
I put it also the reason for the video line has to do with the level of lateness.
Correct. correct. And certainly if the commission wants to make a different finding than my recommendation, I understand and respect that.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion for a good cause for this case.
Second.
Any
Yeah,
comments?
without fun. Right.
Yes.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. It's been duly seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Post same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your support today.
Thank you.
There we go.
For the next matter before the commission is a preliminary review. That'll be Hicks versus LaRose, case number 2022D-001. And we have,
Madam Chair, members of the commission, this is a complaint that alleges the failure to include a proper disclaimer on some fundraising materials that were circulated by the respondent. We have the complainant here. We have counsel here on behalf of the respondents. We had responses submitted to the commission from certain persons related to the campaign committee that gave the explanation. I've synopsized this for you. My response, and as I laid it out in the working agenda, my recommendation to the commission is to find a violation and impose a fine of $50. If the commission would like to hear from the complainant and counsel for the respondent, you can certainly do so.
Good morning.
good morning.
Don't want to go first.
Yes, you want to. Go for it.
You
Not a lawyer,
You
so.
react faster.
Yeah. As the complainant, he'll need to be sworn, he's not counsel.
Please raise your hand. Do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So
I do.
help you God? Thank you.
So in this case, I just want to go through very quickly the affidavit and what actually happened. So Secretary LaRose sent out a campaign material. I have direct personal knowledge of it because I received it. That did not contain a proper disclosure. In my affidavit, I included a copy of the actual material. I included copies of the other materials showing examples of it properly being done, even Secretary LaRosa's materials. So I don't, and based on the responses received that the executive director referred to, I don't think there's a lot of question. I do want to point out, though, that I think you guys, some of you know me, so a lot of you are new, is that I'm very into like accountability and people at the highest levels down to the lowest levels, like the woman that has showed up feeling accountable to our laws, to our election laws, and to our campaign finance laws. The secretary's not here today. Okay, if I was the candidate running in the county, I would have been here today. Okay, not because I necessarily need to be, but because I respect the laws and I want to show that I respect the laws of this state. I just want to point out in this matter that the maximum fine is $500. And I think the chief elections officer in the state should do his campaign literature properly and have a proper review process in place on that campaign literature. I also want to point out that your own rules, 3517-1-04, say that the party shall file a response in the form of an affidavit. In this case, the secretary or his treasurer did not file a response in the form of an affidavit. The affidavits you have are two vendors that are taking responsibility for the mistake. I would have liked to see the secretary be here to show that he, even in a high place, respects that he is under the laws too, and that his behavior is consistent with what he would want and his office would want from other candidates that he brings before this commission. Second, I want you to consider the factor that the secretary did not respond according to your own rules. Is that the party, which would mean either him or his treasurer, files a response affidavit to the complaint. The two people that file response affidavits is a woman who is I guess a consultant or a person that works for someplace named Red Brick Strategies, and a gentleman that works for an outfit called the Dudley Group. I would have liked to see in the responses why there was not proper oversight on these vendors on the part of the secretary's campaign to make sure that printed materials they were sending out, I'm sure at great expense through the mail, were being properly reviewed to be in compliance with the law. So I personally think, I hear the director's recommendation of a $50 fine. And by the way, I think, this whole $50 fine thing is kind of goofy for this commission because it does depend on the experience of the person who's being brought before this commission. If it's somebody that was running a school board campaign and it's the first time that they struggle to do the campaign finance laws correctly, that's a lot different than the chief elections officer of the state, who should know better and should be an exemplar, not only in following the laws, but taking responsibility when his own campaign didn't have the proper mechanisms in place to review that proper disclaimers were being put on his campaign materials. So I believe that the commission should find, I think they're already admitted that the exhibits, I'll authenticate the exhibits that I got them myself in the mail. I don't think they're disputing that. I dispute that the secretary or his treasurer did not file a response affidavit subject to your rules, particularly 3517-1-04A. And I think the fine should be $500, just as an example that this commission holds the people that are in the highest rung of supposedly making sure that we have proper campaign finance and proper campaigns in the state accountable. I'm sure that Secretary LaRose can afford $500. Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of the respondents, Secretary LaRose and LaRose for Ohio, Matt McDonald and Terrence O'Donnell from the law firm of Dickinson Wright at 180 East Broad Street, Columbus, Ohio, 43215. As described in our response, this is a simple case of print vendor error. Mr. Hicks brings this case hoping the mere facial appearance of a violation will harm Secretary LaRose's long-standing stellar reputation for election compliance. Make no mistake, the campaign committee met the letter of Ohio's campaign finance disclosure requirements when drafting this literature piece. There was no violation of Ohio's election laws by the candidate, the committee, or any of its principals. None. LaRose for Ohio is referenced throughout this mail piece. The committee presented a mail piece to its print vendor, the Dudley Group, that included the required conspicuous disclaimer paid for by LaRose for Ohio. That is undisputed and should be dispositive in this case, period. As a factual matter, the committee subsequently instructed its vendor to also include a second disclaimer in an attempt to over-disclose and make explicit that the Secretary's military service does not imply an endorsement from the Army or Department of Defense. As admitted by the Dudley Group, this is important, the printer made an inadvertent error despite clear instructions from the committee in replacing the second disclaimer with the first, instead of adding it as a supplement. That was an honest mistake, and most importantly, not one made by the campaign committee. This is analogous to when a TV or radio station too abruptly cuts a political commercial before a professional voice or written disclaimer appears saying paid for by. In that circumstance, it would be equally inappropriate to find a committee responsible. In addition, the candidate should be dismissed from this complaint as the statute at issue, revised code section 351720I, specifically only applies to candidate entities, not to candidates themselves. So it applies to campaign entities, candidate committees, not candidates. And ultimately, based on the record, the commission should in its discretion dismiss this complaint and return its focus to actual election law violations. And just to quickly address the 2 points that Mr. Hicks raised. The party to the case did file a response via its counsel with 2 attachments, which are before you in our response, which is appropriately dated in accordance with the rules of this body. In addition, this discussion of fines that was just raised has no statutory basis whatsoever. There is no authority for the commission to utilize a determination based on an office holder's office that they hold to implicate what the actual fine should be raised. So just to recap this, there should be a finding of no violation because the committee attempted to over-disclose. Mr. Hicks has failed to demonstrate an intentional violation of our campaign finance laws by the secretary or the committee. The candidate should be dismissed from the complaint as the statute issue applies to campaign entities, not to candidates. The committee followed the law and disclosure related to the candidate's military service. In particular, the print vendor confirms in his affidavit, it directs you to paragraph 7, that it only substituted the campaign disclosure due to its own error, not the error of the committee or any of its principals. We know this is analogous to other inadvertent errors, and ultimately the law has been met here. There's no ambiguity about who authored this mail piece. LaRose for Ohio is the clear author of the piece. In fact, the campaign committee's name, LaRose for Ohio, is referenced throughout the piece. It's clear that the checks are intended to be sent to LaRose for Ohio, and that Mr. LaRose and the committee are the author of the document. The complainant has misstated the record and the secretary's record. The complainant has a record of making exaggerated claims against office holders. And this is one more example of a meritless claim meant to create an appearance of impropriety where there is none. In fact, this is the first time the committee or the candidate have been named as respondents before the OEC, and contrary to the complainant's assertions, neither the committee nor the candidate have been found to have previously violated campaign finance requirements by the commission. The commission should not allow itself to be used this way. In closing, the committee has demonstrated an ongoing commitment to follow Ohio's campaign finance laws. And there was no wrongdoing on the part of the committee or the candidate. And the statute only applies to committees, not candidates. We ask the commission find no violation has occurred. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do commissioners have questions? Comments?
Question to the director. The $50 fine relates to, I guess, what framework compared to other violations?
When I make my recommendations on cases such as this, where you essentially have someone, committee, whatever, before the commission for the first time, regardless of their office, to me, this is a case where I would recommend the imposition or finding a violation, the imposition of a $50 fine. And so I feel like, and what I try to do when I'm making my recommendations is be as consistent as possible. Regardless of whether someone's running for township trustee, county commission, governor, secretary of state. And that's, I believe, what I've done here. And so that's the essential basis for my recommendation to find a violation in this particular set of circumstances against the parties that are before us, because they're ultimately responsible for the materials that are circulated under their name, under the committee's name.
Well, I mean, my view is I think no one is above or below the law, and we should treat this case absolutely as we would any other. I will say that I find it disappointing that counsel for Secretary LaRose basically accepts no responsibility for the final product going out. We have cases that come across here all the time with, inadvertent mistakes. I would have, I guess, been less disciplined if they asked for good cause as opposed to a complete dismissal and lack of responsibility. That being said, again, I think I'm supportive of the current recommendation, but we welcome thoughts from other commissioners in the chair.
Just a question from Mr. McDonald, and I've read the affidavit here of Laura Lashetta Prodi, is it? So I think it's clear in here. I just want to make sure. So on the process, they get the piece, and then it doesn't go back to LaRose. They just mail it. Is that accurate? Is that what happened? Because they say they mailed the piece. I'm trying to figure the process. If it matters to me, if the proof came back to the LaRose campaign, and that they then do their due diligence to say, hey, there's a problem here. Or did it just go to the vendor and the vendor mailed it? That's what I'm trying to figure out. It seems to me, based on this affidavit, that they got the piece and they just mailed it. So can you clear that for us? Or for me anyway?
Certainly. I think for one, the affidavit speaks for itself, so I can't amend,
No, I
I
understand.
can't amend a sworn written statement of someone, but
Gotcha.
in terms of process, my understanding is that there was communications with the vendor. I'm not sure as to the absolute form and timeline, but my understanding is that the vendor had clear instructions from the committee that they were to include a second disclaimer, and ultimately that direction was not followed.
Can I also respond to the question?
I
So,
mean, it's up to the chair.
one thing I just want to make clear is I think there's been some representations since you referenced the affidavit about the piece, like the representation that it had LaRose for Ohio all over it. The only place that has LaRose for Ohio is on the return envelope. No place else that I can see in the piece. So I think there's some issues relating to facts and transparency. And I would remind you, another option you have is that this is a preliminary review. Okay, since I've been personally attacked that I'm somehow, even though currently I think I'm 6-0 on cases before the OEC, that won't hold up. But that I somehow file frivolous cases when I'm 6-0 in cases that have been fully adjudicated is also a bizarre thing to say. I want to remind the commission, when you think about this or confusion you might have about the affidavit, that another option you have is to hold this over for a full hearing. And I would actually recommend that option at this point, given the intransigence, which I'm actually shocked by, of the secretary's office of basically saying, we're not responsible. When any candidate, a township trustee would not be able to walk in here and act like this and say, hey, the printer did, it's not my fault. And it should just be dismissed. And so I just wanted to point out those two things, that there's only one place in the whole piece. Questions as to the affidavit could certainly be cleared up in a full hearing. And I would ask you guys to consider having a full hearing so that the actual facts of this matter can be adjudicated completely, including bringing those affidavit people in to testify as to what actually happened.
So in response to Mr. Hicks's chair, the facts are completely within the affidavits at this time. The issue that is before the commission is whether to find, based on vendor error, whether there should be a violation or not. It would seem as though the time of the commission would be better spent not focusing on further issues which have already been completely described.
Madam Chair, I just want to follow up on Mr. Lyle's question, because I would like to know whether the piece went back to the candidates' campaign for review before it was mailed. That's generally what candidates do. But unless we can hear from the person in the affidavit, we won't know. We won't know what was done from the vendor or from the secretary's campaign.
I know Chancellor would like to speak. So, yeah, we can speak to that. Our understanding is, yes, the proof came back and it didn't have the military, so what we'll call the second disclaimer. It had paid for by LaRose. Campaign committee decided we want to add that this does not also indicate endorsement by the military, because Secretary LaRose has military service that's referenced in the piece. So the review was add that and then send it out. And that's where the error was made, because the vendor who prints also handles shipping, which I think was part of your question, in mailing. So, you know, not to be semantical about it, but in terms of what was the final review was, thank you for this, it looks good, add this and send it. And instead of adding it and sending it, it was delete it and replace the military disclosure, replaced LaRose for Ohio. That's what's described in the affidavit. Mr. McDonald's correct. We think the facts are well known enough to find a decision, and we would not support a full hearing on this matter. Thank you.
Can I respond to the question? So again, I think there's a dispute as the fact here as to what actually happened. Was it properly viewed? Everything you just said is hearsay, because you're not the counsel for the affidavit filer, and they're not here to be able to say what actually happened, nor is anybody directly from the campaign here to say what actually happened and testify as to what happened.
You represent
And this,
we represent the campaign.
your counsel for the campaign.
Well,
I also want to point out, this was a 5-page piece. Okay, it's not, and normally there's disclaimers all over the place on something like that, because there were multiple physical objects in the envelope that did not, separate pages, separate things, physically in the envelope, none of which had a disclaimer on. Okay, so again, given the intransigence and the dispute as to potential fact as to what actually happened, I think that the other alternative before the commission is to have a full hearing so that I and they can bring these people, the defendant, the affidavit filers in, and bring in people from the campaign and get answers that clarify what actually happened here. They've chosen to make it an issue by not just saying we screwed up, it's our fault. They're the ones that have made this a point where they want to claim that they have no responsibility. So let's do a full hearing and figure that out.
no.
No response.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from commissioners? Mr. Richter?
I'm comfortable with my recommendation based on the facts and circumstances that are laid out, you know, in the comments here and the complaint and the response that was submitted. So I'm fine with I believe my recommendation is appropriate for the circumstances.
Hearing from both sides and from Mr. Richter, do we have a motion?
I'll go ahead and move the recommendation of the executive director.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor that's been duly seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign.
I,
Okay. Motion carries with a vote of 6-1.
Yep.
All right, thank you,
Thank you.
gentlemen,
Thank you.
today. So the next,
I do everything else first and do that, with an hour, like, it shouldn't take.
all right, the next group would be the group recommendations. The first is withdrawn by the Board of Elections. That's case number 2023R-091.
No further action is necessary, just acknowledge that once a board reflects that they wish to withdraw a matter, it's withdrawn before the commission. This is just for every published matter in the agenda. And sunshine notice, I'd like to have identified in the minutes.
So that matter is withdrawn. The next is dismissed as matter was resolved with prior case. That is case number 2023R-096. So that matter.
Yes, that action should be taken on that. The commission addressed. I think it was at the last meeting. No, at the meeting on the 13th, I consolidated, or I didn't consolidate this case with that one, but in case number 2022R-257, which is a prior matter, which was failure to file the 21 annual, the respondent filed the report on April 5th, not that much prior, submitted a response to the commission there and terminated with that filing, which then presumably makes this referral for the 2022 annual report moot. And so my recommendation is just go ahead and dismiss this case that we dealt with it at our April 13th meeting.
Any questions by commissioners? If not, do we have a motion?
I'll move the recommendation of the executive director.
so
All right, we have a motion on the floor that's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Post same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next case is a good cause case. It is case 2023R-073. Mr. Richter.
Chair. So about that, members of the commission. This is the first time this person has been before the commission. The report was actually filed on March 17th, which would normally put them in a fine situation, but if you look at the response that was submitted, it was a rather lengthy submission that included statements that the respondent and the treasurer got a new job, had their own sickness, had the sickness and eventual death of father, sickness and eventual death of the grandfather, and certain other activities. And so therefore I'm recommending that we find a violation, but for a good cause, not opposed to voting.
Okay, your motion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. It's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Post same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next category cases is $50 fine. Should just go along there and
Yeah.
give us, okay. So they are 2023R-062, 2023R-074, 2023R-079, 2023R-082, 2023R-092, and 2023R-102.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, these are all cases, excuse me, where either based on the explanation, as is the case in 2023-R-062, or the reports have all been filed and a response submitted to the commission. It's the first time that the individual and the committee is before the commission. Item number 13, 2023-R-062. the explanation provided by the treasurer for that committee made some references and talking to the board, how to discuss, how to terminate the committee, had some back and forth with them, in which they didn't get, in their opinion, good information from the board of election. Normally, I might consider that $100 fine, but based on their explanation, I put that one in the $50 fine category. So that's the only one that's a little bit out of the ordinary. Other than that, first time before the commission, report filed, response submitted. I'll be glad to answer any of the questions, commission.
Any questions? Any comments? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion on the floor that's been duly seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Post same sign. Motion carried with the vote of 7-0. The next category is the $100 fine category. That would be case number 2023R-090.
Kind of went back and forth with the board on this one. Originally, they were asking for us to continue the matter. Then I got a subsequent response from the staff of the board that indicated the report had been filed. And the way it was phrased was they are closing the committee. That means they're actually terminating it. So they reflected that the report's been filed as of May 1. We did not receive a response from the respondent. We did get good mail service. So my recommendation is find violation of impose a fine of $100.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion on the floor. It's been duly seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Post same sign. Motion carries with the vote of 7-0. The next case is 2023R-055. This recommendation is consolidate with case number 2022R-499, find a violation and impose a fine of $100.
This is a situation where the group submitted a response. They filed their report in March. Considering there was another item outstanding, my recommendation here is to consolidate these matters, find a violation, and impose a fine of $100. I would like to answer any other questions for Commissioner.
Any questions or comments?
Just one question, Madam Chair. Mr. Richter, is this the only other violation during the time frame we go back and look at?
Aside from the case we're consolidating with, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll move the recommendation of the executive director.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor that's been duly seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with the vote 7-0. The next case is case number 2023R-108. The recommendation is to reconsider case numbers 2022R-226 and 2021R-460. Vacate the previous findings, consolidate all cases, find a violation, and impose a fine of $100.
The matters that I'm having us reconsider, I recommended, and the commission found a violation, imposed $25 per day fine. The report has now been filed. It was late. No response has been submitted. But rather than keep that other one open, I just thought it was appropriate to reconsider that, consolidate all these matters, impose, find a violation, impose a fine of $100. I'll be glad to answer your commission. Any other questions that the commission may have?
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor. It's been duly seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next category is the $150 fine category. That is case number 2023R-083. Mr. Richter.
Prior violation in which the commission found the violation imposed the $100 or a $50 fine, excuse me, that was paid. They're back now again before the commission. The report has been filed. No response has been submitted in this particular situation. So my recommendation is to find a violation and impose a fine of $150 primarily because that response has not been submitted.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Move we accept the recommendation of the executive director.
Second. All right, we have a motion on the floor. It's been duly seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next category is a $200 fine category. That would be case number 2023R-107.
Reported and filed, there were a response submitted that there were two prior matters. One in the commission dealt with in 2020, imposed a $50 fine that was paid. Then in 2022, that was no late filing, which the commission imposed a fine that was paid. Now he's back again for the third time, but is again late. And so my recommendation is to find a violation and impose a fine of $200.
Questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I move to advance recommendation of the executive director.
So
All right, we have a motion on the floor. It's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Post same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0.
Before we proceed on to the next 1, 2, 3, 4 recommendations, I will just merely say these are all situations where committees are either before the commission for the first time or for multiple times. The reports have not yet been filed, so that's why I'm recommending the imposition of a per diem fine in all these matters. The difference between one recommendation and the other is the number of times they've been before the commission previously. The last item down there was $9,000. That is reflective of the annual report for 2022 not being filed at the end of January on 2023. And so that $9,000 reflects $100 a day for the 90 days since that occurred. So rather than spend a lot more time me speaking about each one, I just thought I'd go ahead and address them all at the same time. If there's any other questions the commission may have, I'll be glad to respond. Yes.
So the first one would be $25 a day with reconsideration option. That's 2023R-065.
Correct. Just ask for a motion and proceed.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next one is $25 a day with reconsideration option with payment of $250. That's case number 2023R-070. We have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next two cases is R 2023R-088, 2023R-094. These are recommendation to impose a fine of $2,250 plus $25 a day with reconsideration option. Do we have a motion?
So
Second.
Right, we have a motion on the floor. It's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next category of cases is a $9,000 plus $100 a day with reconsideration option. They are 2023R-057, 2023R-072, 2023R-084, 2023R-086, and 2023R-109. Do we have a motion?
Some.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor. It's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next group are continuous cases. They are continued due to lack of service.
That's all we have.
Okay, so,
Set.
all right, so I'm gonna read those into the minutes.
Yes.
Okay, so they are cases 2023R-051, 2023R-052, 2023R-053, 2023R-054, 2023R-056, 2023R-059, 2023R-060, 2023R-061, 2023R-063, 2023R-064, 2023R-066, 2023R-067, 2023R-068, 2023R-069, 2023R-071, 2023R-075, 2023R-076, 2023R-077, 2023 R-078, 2023 R-080, 2023 R-081, 2023 R-085, 2023 R-087, 2023 R-089, 2023 R-093, 2023 R-095, 2023 R-099, 2023 R-100, 2023 R-101, 2023 R-103, 2023 R-015, 2023 R-016, and 2023 R-110. Those cases are continued.
Thank you. I would just comment to the commission, similar to what I commented to you, Chair. This is probably the longest list of continued I think I've had in all my years here. And I think part of it comes down to we need, talk to Chris at least briefly, we need to get notices out earlier than we have been. We've been following about the same pattern for years now, but all of a sudden, I think over the last 6 months to a year, we see more of this where it's just taking longer to get mailings out and delivered. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing here. I apologize for this, but you know, we will work on getting things out with additional time. We normally send out materials 45 to 55 days in advance of a meeting. And for the longest time, that was good enough. It's appearing now that that's not necessarily the case. So we're going to start getting out materials earlier, and hopefully we'll get, you know, because then it gives us an opportunity to get responses back and then resend a second notice that, you know, for which we can claim service. That obviously didn't happen here. So sorry, we'll work on that.
I'm sure I have a question. I'm mindful. I probably should have asked this before you had to read the exhausting list. Phil, is it necessary for the chair to read every number? Could she not have said, hold on, that in the series of 2023R and then just read the -05-052 and so on? Is that appropriate?
I think almost anything is appropriate when it comes right down to
That's why I said I'm mindful. That
Yeah,
that's this.
right. What she did is what we've historically done since we've, you know, kind of continued matters in this way where the chair just goes ahead and continues cases. I don't know that there would be anything wrong with that because it's mainly a matter of trying to state them to get them into the record, you know, so that they are mentioned. So if that's the way the commission wants to proceed in the future, I don't have a problem with that. That makes perfect sense.
I mean, it might just be the call of the chair, wouldn't it? Or no?
I have no problem with that. Sitting literally by my.
Trying to help you out.
Transpose this without copying and pasting it in minutes.
There you go.
I didn't, I mean,
You could read the whole heading, yeah.
I didn't, I'm proud of myself. I did not.
Future,
Yes, yeah, as long as they're all the same, I think
Right.
we can do that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great.
Okay.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the hearing. Mr. Hickson versus Schmidt. So. I know we have people here on this.
Yeah, Ron O'Brien on behalf of Representative Gene Smith for the hearings, High Supreme Court number 0017245. We're prepared to proceed. If you are going to have a hearing, I did bring a packet of exhibits that might facilitate your review and copy Mr. Hicks as well as Mr. Richter.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and hand them to me, actually give them to Chris. I make him do the work. Yeah. And for, you know, Chris will circulate those. For your information, Mr. Hicks provided some exhibits over the last couple of days. I have sent them all to you.
I have a packet.
Oh, I have them already. Mr. Hickman, heroes, I had provided them to you previously, so if you had downloaded all the information, you had them, but I thought it was appropriate to, put them in front of you, as well. Things access, so you have, Mr. Hicks reuses those exhibits. Also,
But just for clarity, the packet he has now has some additional exhibits in it in their number. Mr. Richter, despite me asking you multiple times where they can be provided, you never answered, so I produced this packet. These are properly numbered and it's the numbers I'll be referring to.
where did you get those materials?
They're my materials.
So I understand that. Did you send them to me in?
I sent you the old version and I asked you if you were going to reproduce them for the commission. You would not answer if I brought my own. But since then, I've added a few other things, but I didn't send you because you didn't respond.
I guess I'm asked from the executive director. So when we shut down today, we have a number of exhibits in front of us, both in the binder and outside of the binder. How do those differentiate from what's being handed to us by parties?
Amended complaint outside binder, binder was exhibits.
Okay, but are these parties the same as what's in the binder?
Mr. Hicks just indicated he added something to what I had previously.
Thank you.
Previously circulated.
All right.
No, that's the complaint.
Okay.
Behind it is the amended complaint. And this is, that's here. And I thought I was providing what he had submitted.
Back in the case.
I just want to be very clear that I apologize for any confusion, but I did ask the executive director multiple times if the documents were being reproduced for the commission. He would not answer. So I brought copies for you, and the copies the biggest thing is I added a few things, but I also added page numbering at the bottom because in a prior hearing, sometimes it gets confusing and it's easier to refer to a specific page number in the footer.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, let's proceed with this matter. And he's already sworn in.
Yeah, we just need to be invited, convinced. You were sworn earlier, so you're sworn to appear before the commission.
You're wanting to get sworn in again?
No, I was just reminding you have been sworn.
Yes. But I'd also like to discuss the discovery motion prior to beginning the full hearing.
Okay, I mean, you had kind of indicated that, that's what I indicated to the commission members we would immediately be talking about, but you had also indicated that, you were willing to move away from that and proceed to the hearing. So whatever you want to do is fine.
Okay, and I want to do you want me to talk from here or stand up?
I think probably better, I would guess it's probably better if you stood, but that's the commission's choice and not mine.
I think.
Do you want to have a vote with it?
No.
Make a motion. I need to stand.
Whatever feels comfortable with.
It doesn't matter to me. So what I had indicated to the executive director is my willingness to drop the discovery motion. But I did not say that I was dropping the discovery motion. I'm still prepared to drop the discovery motion, but I need to have some clarity in so doing. Let's keep in mind here that this matter was referred to a full hearing, I think over 20 months ago. Over 20 months ago, it was referred to a full hearing. There's been some people who've been involved with me in longer hearings before. A lot of you haven't because it's so long has gone by to when this was held over for a full hearing. I think the key thing involved here is whether or not for certain on the record, Ms. Smith is asserting her right against self-incrimination when it comes to all these things: testimony, interrogatories, depositions, document discovery, and filing an answer. Okay. If she is asserting her right against self-incrimination, as has been indicated to me by counsel, then I would like to know that on the record before making a decision to drop the discovery motion.
Mr. O'Brien, would you like to-
Well, I guess I'm not sure he's entitled to that to a particular point in time, Madam Chairman. Either he has a motion to compel discovery, which he did file and I did respond to. And if he's going to go forward with that, I'm prepared to address that. But I noticed just before I came in the hearing room that he posted on his Facebook page that people should tune into this hearing to see Jean Smith assert the Fifth Amendment. And she has not done that yet. She has not made a decision yet. And until there's a point in this hearing where she's required to make that decision, I don't think that he can ask her to make a decision. She's here today and will make a decision on presenting. Certainly, I have 8 exhibits that I've marked and presented to you, and will present information and evidence. But I think she wants to tell her side of the story when it is the right time to do so. So if Mr. Hicks wants to proceed with a motion to compel, then he certainly can do that.
I would just like to correct the record as to what was just said. What's on my Facebook page says this: 2 cases today, Schmidt and LaRose. Schmidt is claiming she will take the 5th. That is based on a letter, which I'm glad we could, I don't know that you could introduce an exhibit now, but it's one of the additional exhibits that's in that stack from you, Mr. O'Brien. Okay, so that's a factually correct statement as to what was indicated to me in an email from you. So I don't like the mischaracterization of what I said or what I have done. That being said, I think you were a prosecutor. This is a civil procedure. We're under civil rules. So somebody taking the 5th in a civil procedure, actually it does imply that a criminal activity took place. Unlike in a criminal matter, this is a civil matter. I think given the nature of this commission and the civil rules, leaving it kind of a mystery as to whether the candidate is asserting the 5th or not is not appropriate due process for a civil matter. Okay, if she wants to take the stand then and then refuse to answer certain questions, she can do that. But the point being, right now, as we stand right now, in the letter that's been provided by Mr. O'Brien to me, she asserted that she did not file an answer because of the fear of incrimination, that she will not submit to, that her treasurer will not submit to deposition for fear of incrimination, that she will not answer interrogatories due to fear due to that needing to take the 5th, that she will not submit the document discovery. Those of you around, even Alan Freeman submitted a document discovery without a hassle.
Well, we'll stick to this though.
And she will not testify asserting her right to self-incrimination. That's based on the letter you sent me yesterday. So I think as the complainant, clarity is she on those matters? So for example, on this motion to compel, are you asserting the right of self-incrimination as a reason she will not respond to document discovery? That's a very legitimate question, specifically related to this discovery motion.
Mr. O'Brien.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I believe it was in August of 2021 that I filed a document with this commission expressing our viewpoint, which frankly was sanctioned in the Freeman case. And again, I know that this is a separate case, but the same kind of issue arose in that case. And I have been very careful not to use the word the Fifth Amendment because Mr. Hicks wants to bandy it about that Representative Schmidt is asserting the Fifth Amendment. The commission's own rules say that a respondent can't be compelled to testify, and I think that was the ruling of the commission back on the Freeman's case. And as Mr. Hicks well knows, a referral can be made by this commission, although it's rare for a criminal prosecution. So we're just Mr. Hicks in June of 2020, I believe, or 2021, filed a complaint alleging she violated 4 Ohio statutes on campaign finance filings. He didn't file against the treasurer, I might add. He didn't file against the campaign. He filed against per Representative Gene Smith. He later filed an amended complaint and didn't file it against the campaign committee or the treasurer. The commission had a preliminary review, and Mr. Richter recommended this complaint is sufficient on its face. It should.
I want to object to this as the relevance to the discovery motion. He's sort of making a case
Well,
and addressing the complaint when the issue before the commission right now is a pending discovery motion.
at least if I could finish without interruption, and at least I normally, if I have an objection to what the other councils are saying, I might object and not give speech. But in any event,
So I object.
Continue.
okay, thank you. I guess I was just trying to give the history. The commission voted 3-3 to not follow the recommendation of Mr. Richter. As I recollect, part of the concern was that perhaps there might be new information that could become available if it was set for a hearing that would justify having a hearing. And some of the members, including, I think, Commission Member Tavares and I think Mr. Norman at the time said, well, you know, is this done and over if we decide today to dismiss it, or if new information comes forward in the interim, could we refile it? And I think my take that was the reason for setting it over for a hearing, and Mr. Tavares did make that motion to set it over for a hearing. And as Mr. Hicks said, that it's been pending for this amount of time. At least, you know, it's my view. He has a motion to compel. If he wants to go forward with it, he can. He said, I thought that he was prepared to go forward today. He did not say that he intended specifically to withdraw his motion to compel discovery, but he said he might. So I guess that it was his motion. He can choose to withdraw it, or he can choose to argue it to the commission, and Mr. Richter can make a recommendation. The commission can vote on whether the motion to compel the discovery should be required.
Thank you.
Well, the one comment I will make, Mr. Hicks, is realize that while this commission acts in the administrative capacity, the statutes that we are enforcing are potentially criminal statutes, as Mr. O'Brien referenced, and we could make a referral for prosecution. And so therefore we have to respect any respondents' of willingness, ability, however they want to phrase it, in terms of not producing any information on their behalf, whether you want to call it taking the fifth or whatever, you know, and so this commission has long respected that set of circumstances, and that would be the case here. You know, Ms. Smith can't be compelled to testify against herself unless she chooses to do so on her own, and that's a decision that presumably she would make down the line somewhere if you put your case in today. And then after the assessment is made of what it is that you've established, whether she wants to testify or not is a choice that she then has to make.
So I want to clean up just a few things that he said. The actual complaints in multiple places say Ms. Schmidt and/or Schmidt for Ohio. The specific allegations are against Ms. Schmidt and/or Schmidt for Ohio. In the complaint, I would direct people to look in the packet I just handed out, page 25. So there's some things being said here. I also think, I don't know if anybody here from the commission and remember what the votes were, but I don't remember this 3-3 vote. I remember what I thought was a unanimous vote to hold it over for a full hearing. And then you did a motion to reconsider, and that motion to reconsider, that decision failed by a unanimous vote. So the characterization that this was some hair splitting thing that barely got held over for a full hearing, I think is incorrect to the record. And if there's a commissioner that can remember I don't remember the exact votes, but my recollection is unanimous vote for a full hearing and a unanimous vote against your motion to reconsider that I believe was adjudicated on September 8th of 2021. As it goes to discovery, the rules of the commission say prior to availing themselves of the power of the commission to compel discovery, a party shall reasonably submit to the request of another party and produce the necessary documents, information, other discovery items without the intervention of the commission staff. That's rule 3517-1-09. The Freeman thing was probably a wild ride in terms of I don't know how often it's happened that somebody's tried to assert their right against self-incrimination in a civil procedure, but I'd like to remind people, if I admit to a crime in any civil procedure, I'm subject to criminal prosecution. So this is a very dangerous slope where you have especially people, again, think of that person running for township trustee that would never think of this elaborate claim. Okay, is that you have people that should know better that are saying, oh, well, I don't want to have to testify. I don't want to have to provide discovery, et cetera. So those are your own rules. And at the time when the Alan Freeman matter, what he ultimately testified, okay, but he had filed a response affidavit. He also provided document discovery. And I don't know that this commission has ever had a legal opinion on document discovery. Can a party refuse to provide document discovery before the Ohio Election Commission? Some of you are new here, and I think these are very dangerous grounds where sophisticated politicos are now using these assertions to basically come stonewall before the commission. And I think in a civil procedure, on the motion to discovery and my inclination to drop that motion to discovery, I don't think it's unreasonable that I know whether the party is asserting privilege, I'm sorry, not privilege, but the right of self-incrimination on every aspect of discovery, including document discovery.
Chair, ask the question to the director. So there's a lot of stuff being said, and I'm only a year in, and I'm not an attorney. So is it true that it is the position historically of the commission that, you know, without making any specific claim, that a, you know, respondent can just say no to discovery? Because the way I'm hearing it is basically there's no discovery unless the respondent just doesn't know that's an option, right? I mean, there's really no discovery in our process at all, ever, based on what I'm kind of hearing. Is that true? All that the respondent to do is say, well, you know, I'm invoking a potential right. There could be some sort of criminal prosecution, therefore I'm going to do anything. That seems to be, you know, no discovery at all, ever.
Well, as directly requesting it from the respondent, yes, you can still do discovery. You can reach out to whatever other sources may be available to you. But this commission has actually, over the first few years of the commission, the commission wasn't exactly the best at, let's say, respecting a person's potential use of the Fifth Amendment rights. But after, shall I say, getting a little bit more information on it and looking at the circumstances a little more seriously, the commission subsequently, you know, realized that while we are acting in an administrative capacity, and technically all these folks could come back and say to, you know, that we dealt with today with certain campaign finance filings, I'm not going to respond to you, you know, then they're subjecting themselves to the fact that we have no response from them. We don't know what their circumstance was. And we have an ability to take the word of the Board of Elections and proceed, and they don't have to respond to us. That is
even in a hearing.
Huh?
Even in a formal hearing.
Regardless of whether it's at the preliminary review stage or hearing or whatever. That's from the respondent. Alternatively, others, you know, you could reach out to other sources. He could, Mr. Hicks presumably could bring in witnesses. He could reach out to anybody else that may have pertinent information to a degree different than we saw in the Little Rose case today, where folks did submit responses to the commission. Historically, the commission's looked at if we get good information on a matter, then we can rely on that information to proceed. I think as we did in the Little Rose matter today. But this commission has respected the fact over the last probably 20 years that we cannot compel a respondent to do anything against their interests because of the possibility of referral for prosecution.
But they don't have to claim that, so the bottom line is, we just don't compel discovery. They don't have to
Correct.
give a formal reason.
Correct.
We're assuming that reason could be criminal prosecution.
Correct.
That's not a requirement. So the bottom line is that the Ohio Elections Commission position is, we do not compel discovery.
We do not compel discovery from the respondent, from
Okay.
whoever is listed as a respondent.
Okay,
Correct.
want to make sure I understand. Okay.
No, I understand. It's a reasonable question. And it, you know, I mean, I don't know if I want to say it's a slippery slope, but you know, and the like, you know, is it likely that this case is going to be referred for prosecution? You know, that'll be determined by, you know, whenever this thing goes to trial and what the result is. But there's always that possibility, and as long as there is that possibility, we have to respect a respondent's desire not to produce any evidence that they don't have to produce because it could put them at risk.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Mr. Hicks.
So I just want to clean up a few things that were said by Mr. Richter. First, your rules for discovery are specifically related to parties. Okay, so if I go try to get discovery from a non-party, they can tell me they're not going to give me discovery. And that's happened. It happened in the Alan Freeman matter. But your rule 3517-1-09 on discovery, it's in your own rules, is specifically refers to request of another party to produce the discovery between the parties. Okay. I want to point out also that your rule 3517-1-04 about service and filing of pleadings and documents. Okay. And I'll read it. This had to do with the shall file a response, so that somebody who's a respondent per your rules shall file a response in the form of an affidavit. Okay. So that's one of your things, which, by the way, if these things are all up in the air, somebody should be doing a lot of emergency rule changes to the Ohio Administrative Code, because what we're hearing here today is that the rules in the Ohio Administrative Code, as they stand today, are not enforceable by this commission. They're not going to be enforced. The rule that I mentioned, the 3517, I'll come back to 04, 3517-1-09, specifically has, if such efforts fail, an aggrieved party may petition the commission to compel the necessary discovery. If those rules aren't valid, and they've always not been valid, then why are they in the Ohio Administrative Code? It should say in there, no party shall be required to submit to discovery, and the commission shall do nothing to motivate discovery. I want to remind you that this is supposed to be a civil process, subject to the civil rules, particularly Rule 26 and Rule 30. And again, legally, I'm not a lawyer, okay? But if you go read the case law and around this, is when somebody asserts their right of self-incrimination in a civil matter, that is an implication that there were criminal activity. But I want to go back to 3517-1-04 in your rules. This is the one that has to do with filing a response on the merits in the form of an affidavit. Okay, shall, and with the shall, when the word shall was a word before in here, that must. It says the last paragraph of section A of response of that rule. If the respondent fails to find a proper response, which by the way is in the form of an affidavit, commission staff shall timely notify the respondent by regular mail that by failing to respond or show good cause for such failure to respond, the respondent may be deemed to have admitted the allegations in the complaint and may allow the commission to make a finding against the respondent. Again, based on what Mr. Richter says, especially since, at least from my experience, the Freeman matter where this stuff all came into full focus, why are these rules still the same then? It's almost 2 years later. And that's, you know, so it's a long time after. Why have the rules then not been changed to reflect the things that are being said by the executive director? And how is a complainant supposed to come forward and find out in hearings that, hey, the rules that are actually in the Ohio Administrative Code and that say civil procedure, there's a whole litany, but 26, there's a whole in 3517-1-09, there's a whole list of what rules of civil procedure apply to these hearings. If those don't apply, and Mr. Richter, if your assertion is those don't really apply, why hasn't there been any action to fix them in 2 years? So I think as a complainant in what's supposed to be a civil process, who is supposed to have the response, the ability under Rule 26, under Rule 30, under discovery rules to do things on my part, you put this situation into me where it becomes, what is the point of this whole commission? If people just waltz in and say, hey, I don't want to respond. So I just wanted to correct a few things because you made a statement about you can go do discovery from other people. That's not what your rules talk about. They talk specifically about discovery between the parties. And I wanted to hit on, if these rules all aren't valid, how am I supposed to put forward a case? How would you have felt about that, Mr. O'Brien? If when you were a prosecutor, the documented rules do or don't apply based on particular situations. So again, I come back to, I think I have the reasonable right as a complainant to know whether on, and we could put it in the context of this motion hearing, in this motion discussion or whatever it is, are you asserting that you are not going to respond to any element of discovery, which I rattled off a list of things from the standpoint of filing a response, depositions, document discoveries, interrogatories. Let's stop there. I won't go to testimony here. I'll stop right there. Are you asserting that even if this commission were to compel discovery, you are going to assert your right against self-incrimination and refuse discovery? Because that's very important to me in terms of proceeding today or not with this case.
That's fine, but you should be addressing us, not Mr. O'Brien. So please make sure,
I apologize.
Thank you. Would you like to respond?
Madam Chair, the respondent did file an affidavit in response to the complaint. It's Exhibit 4 in the documents that I gave to you, included with a motion to dismiss. It's a affidavit from Rob Secor, who was executive director of the Republican Party, who said in that affidavit he had not assigned Mr. Mancini to work on the next campaign, which were two of the allegations that had been made, criminal offenses, I might add, that Mr. Hicks has made, and at least when affidavits claiming crime has been committed, be it in a municipal court or pursuant to an indictment, the person that files it has a burden of proof, as does Mr. Hicks in this hearing today. And if he's not prepared to prove the allegations, then Mr. Richter's recommendation from August of 21 should be followed. And if he is prepared to prove the allegations, then he has to honor whatever the law may be in the area, and that is he can't compel discovery from respondents, which Mr. Richter has said twice here today. He said in the Freeman case that Mr. Hicks was also involved in. So at least I don't know if the chair has the ability to call the question.
What's this exhibit you referred to, please?
It's Exhibit 4 in the package I gave you this morning, Mr. Hicks. It's the affidavit of Mr. Secor from the Ohio Republican Party, which is Exhibit 1 to Exhibit 4. That motion was filed with the commission August 11 of 21. Frankly, I think why there was a 3-3 vote, and cleaning up the record, since you'd like to do that. There was a 3-3 vote. Motion was Cunningham based off of Mr. Richter's recommendations to dismiss the case that day. Subsequently, you're correct. That having tied through 3, the matter was settled for hearing unanimously, and a motion to reconsider that was denied. But it's on YouTube, and I watched it yesterday at minutes 45 to 57 of the commission's meeting. If there's a need to review it.
Thank you.
Do you remember what day the hearing was, the preliminary review was?
August 12th to 21.
This particular affidavit is not a response to the allegation, nor is it a response by anybody who's associated with their campaign. Okay, so it's the particular affidavit relates to the assignment of resources, not to her response to the particular complaint. So I just want to throw in here that to characterize it is that the respondent filed a answer in the form of an affidavit because Rob Secor gave you an affidavit who has no connection with the Gene Schmidt campaign or Gene Schmidt at all is disingenuous. There was never a response by a party in this matter. Other than per se, per se, there was some element of response in your motion to reconsider per se on the form of legal counsel, but that was not the form of an affidavit. But I come back to my question again, are you, as it relates to the motion to compel discovery, I think I've heard Mr. Richter say that from now on, the commission will never compel discovery. And I think I've heard you say that you would not stand for discovery on the grounds of self-incrimination. If that's the case, I would like to have that be clear on the record from both the commission and from Ms. Schmidt that that's your stance, because that would have a direct relation, because then it's effectively my motion to be compelled becomes moot. Because the commission is saying you would never, the executive director is representing that he would never grant a motion to compel going forward on discovery. And I think they're saying they wouldn't respond anyway if you did. And that's absolutely critical to my dropping or maintaining that motion.
Thank you. Director.
Well, a couple at least. One, and we keep going back and forth through a variety of different things here. And just if you think back this morning to the Euclid Public Library case when the lady appeared before the commission, we have received a written response. She also showed up and made a comment to the commission. We have regularly will have persons appear in person before the commission and make a statement to the commission on which the commission then relies to make a finding in a particular case, even though we may not have received a written submission. And looking back at August 12th with regard to whether a response was ever filed or not, when the commission held a preliminary review in that case, Mr. O'Brien was present on behalf of Ms. Schmidt. He offered a comment on behalf of his client. So there was a response at that point. At that August 12th meeting. My recommendation would be to deny Mr. Hick's motion. And then we could either proceed to hearing, or if he needs more time, we can set the matter to a later date. If he wants to do something else as it relates to trying to provide evidence to the commission. But my recommendation would be to deny the motion.
Questions from the commissioners? From the commissioners?
Just for my clarity, exactly what is the motion that's for? That would be.
The motion to allow discovery, to allow further discovery, correct.
I guess the one comment or request, it might be worth considering an advisory opinion on clarifying that, assuming that the executive director thinks that there may be there seems to be at a high level, I guess, without, just kind of hearing, there seems to be, certainly on my end, some confusion between, what the, Ohio, the OAC says and what our policies are. It would, maybe there's an advisory opinion opportunity, or maybe that's, maybe it's something, but I certainly feel that I don't know where the OAC ends and historical commission precedent begins, and it makes it tough to come up with what I feel is a good vote one way or the other in this situation, frankly.
Thank you. Any other comments? Can you tell me what you cited some different civil codes. They're something that would help maybe Commissioner Knight with making a snapshot of what it is that we do, or that we, you know, as opposed to what has traditionally been done.
We realize that the vast majority of cases the commission deals with are referrals from the various county boards for elections. And in referring back to the rules that Mr. Hicks was referring to, wanted to make it clear that a respondent is, I don't know if I want to say it right, not right, an ability to submit a response to the commission that gives an explanation of the circumstances, and if they don't, then the commission may use that as a basis to make a finding against them and impose what it believes the appropriate sanction. The majority of matters are dealt with that way. People submit a response, give us the explanation of difference in the lady that had the 2-page explanation with all the various maladies that her family faced. And you can take that into consideration. And if we don't get a response, and you'll hear me say, you know, then I will reflect that in my recommendation to the commission as well, to, let's say, impose a more substantial penalty. If you want to go from 50 to 100 or 100 to 150 is substantial, most people even consider that to be the case. So it impacts the recommendations that I'll make. But alternatively, you have a situation like this where you have something that becomes much more contentious. And someone wants to, someone, a respondent, looks at the situation and says, hey, I believe that I could potentially face more serious criminal prosecution than just an administrative setting. They want to protect that right and ability to.
We're not requiring them to say that. That's not required. I mean, the way it's been described, they don't have to say anything. They can just not, and they cannot be compelled. The commission won't compel them because they might have that problem.
That's
So
correct.
it doesn't, I mean, so there's no discovery. And the way Mr. Hicks has described the code is it seems to offer like the ability for a complainant to have some, through some civil procedures that I'm not familiar with. But we have a default, our policy as described is, we don't require them to say that. We just don't, they don't respond. We take that into account in our, evaluation and determination. But again, our default is to not require anything. We just take into account they didn't say.
Correct. And I think there you have the difference between, at least one thing I would comment on is a constitutional right that someone has under the Fifth Amendment.
But we're not requiring them to say that though, right? They don't have to say that. They don't have to say anything. They just don't compel. Like, we're not requiring them to deny this discovery based on that.
That's
Right.
correct.
They just don't have to do discovery.
That's correct.
But in a normal matter, they would have to assert that privilege themselves.
Just said it seemed a little lopsided.
Well, we're here because this man chose to file a complaint alleging 4 crimes were committed. And for a year and a half, we've been denying it. We denied it with the affidavit that we filed. Mr. Richter, looking at the complaint with 25 years experience down here, recommended it be dismissed. The commission tied on that vote, and then it was settled for this hearing today. We're here today. We're ready to proceed. And Mr. Hicks, whether we like it or not, the law in some time, and as I frequently told people, it's the laws that we have to follow, whether we like it or not, kind of situation. And we're here today prepared to proceed, and so advised Mr. Hicks and advised Mr. Richter earlier this week or even several weeks ago. We're here, I might add also, because Mr. Hicks sued you all and said, give me a hearing. I don't know if you know that or not, but, we're here because Mr. Richter set it for hearing, because there was a lawsuit filed by Mr. Hicks, which is still pending. So we're here, we're ready for the hearing. Ms. Schmidt is missing a legislative kind of thing to be here this morning because it's so important to her. She'd like to get it behind her, and at least answering, I think, the commission members' question. I don't believe, as I did on August 12th of 21, that Mr. Hicks has a case. And so I think I would like to see him present his case, and I'm going to ask the commission to dismiss it based on the evidence he has presented, because his evidence will not show violation. And so at that point in time, if the commissioner would deny it, then Ms. Schmidt would have the opportunity to herself then testify and explain the circumstances, but it would be only at that point that she needs to make a decision. And while Mr. Hicks says that this is a civil administrative proceeding, that's correct, but your rules do contemplate conducting it as if it were a trial with opening statements, presentation of evidence, and those of you on the commission who have seen some of these hearings are well aware of that. So at least I don't know if that clarifies anything better, from the respondent standpoint.
Thank you. Yes.
I just want to clarify that Ms. Schmidt is here because she was a team councilor candidate whose name showed up all over the place in other cases. So not because this thing you saw with LaRose, you see now, I'm the demon as a citizen, had no financial or other value to me bringing forward these kind of cases. I take umbrage to that. These constant personal smears of me that somehow I'm the bad guy and I caused somebody to do something. I didn't cause Ms. Schmidt to get in a team house and then with Larry Household.
Okay, no. We're gonna stick to just the facts on both sides. Commissioner Lyle.
Yes, Madam Chair. So I have a question for Mr. Richter. So is there a way, obviously, we have a pull and tug here, without being able to seem to me to move forward. Is there also, we have the issue with the motion of discovery. Is there a way that we can ask them to, for lack of a better term, brief that issue and revisit it and then go forward with the hearing? Can we do that?
I'm not sure how we would ask them to do that and go forward with the hearing.
Can I just say something?
Well, we're prepared to go forward.
I'm
She
prepared to go
will
forward.
testify. She will waive any
Let's
rights
move
she may have.
forward.
She wants to get this done today. She's prepared to testify. She's prepared to explain her circumstances. And so at least Mr. Hicks can withdraw his motion and present his case. And if she needs to testify after he presents his case, then she will. But we want to have a hearing today to get this concluded.
Thank you. Are you
That's acceptable.
willing to withdraw?
I'm willing to have you guys have a vote on my motion of discovery, but regardless of how you vote, I'm prepared to proceed with the hearing today. But I'd like it to be on the record, whether this commission, it will ever exercise its authority to compel discovery or not.
Commissioners have further questions? Hearing none, do we have a motion to deny Mr. Richter? Guess my take on this is if we can, someone can make the motion to deny, at least we can vote yes, or we can vote no, we will know, and it will either pass or not pass, and we can move on. Is that really kind of our options?
That doesn't sound unreasonable.
At least we can move on.
Doesn't the person who makes the motion have to vote yes?
That is a good question that I've wondered that myself.
I don't believe it.
Yes, I don't believe it.
Okay.
Found it to be the case.
Madam Chair, just to move the question along, I'll make the motion.
We have a second.
And the motion is to deny.
Another motion.
So we're denying discovery. That's the motion.
That's the motion.
I'm putting it forward for the commission.
Do we have a second? I'll second the motion. We have a motion on the floor. It's been duly seconded. All in favor to deny the motion?
Roll call or just do a general.
Can you please state the full motion?
We have pending before us
So we're very clear.
is. Complainant's motion to compel discovery. Is the motion that's pending before us. There is pending now a motion to deny that motion to compel discovery.
Mr. Richter, will you do a roll call vote?
So Mr. Lyle,
No.
Ms. Hagan,
No.
Mr. Knight,
No.
Mr. Kolke,
No,
Mr. Stoutberg,
No.
Ms. Tavares,
No.
Chair Cochran.
No.
The motion fails 7-0. So the motion is still out there.
Okay. So the next step, moving forward,
Hearing right now.
please, with all due respect. I'm talking to our executive director.
Well, if it wanted to press discovery, we could presumably go to move to approve that motion. Or if Mr. Hicks decides he wants to withdraw it, we could presumably proceed, excuse me, to the hearing, but the motion is still out there. And it, the motion to deny was denied.
So we have everyone here today. I believe at this point, we would all like to move forward. So if you would be willing to withdraw so we can move forward, or if not, then obviously it's going to be moved to another day.
I think you can move forward without taking action on a motion. Courts do it all the time.
Okay, well, then we will move forward.
Okay.
So at this time, yes,
We take a 5 or 10 minute recess because I'd like to get a bottle of water.
absolutely,
can.
yes. Thank you. So it's 12:05. If we could all take 10 minutes, be back at 12:15. We will adjourn, we will recess at this time and be back at 12:15. So let's proceed with the matter at hand, which is, the complainant asserts the respondent did not provide complete information and certain campaign finance reports and accepted direct corporate activity in her campaign finances. So, Mr. Hicks.
My opening statement.
Before, just to say, the commission has essentially a hard out. Member needs to leave at 3:30. So,
Okay.
you know, I mean, if it goes beyond, we may be back again, but we got a hard out at 3:30.
In theory, I have a hard out between 1:30 and 2. So your calendar for this meeting was scheduled from 10 to 1. So you just mentioned 3, Mr. Richter, so my expectation is that this meeting will be somewhat in the confines of the time schedule that was called for and noticed to the public.
Thank you.
Is that a fact? Given I have to make a case, is that a correct assumption?
Yes,
That
that's
this
a correct
meeting will,
assumption.
okay.
Yes.
We're here for a hearing today, and at least it's our expectation we will go until finished. He has no witnesses, and Ms. Schmidt will testify if it comes to that.
Perfect. And in the past, we have gone past the time that's on the sheet
Right.
if we need to. Knowing at this, at this
Right.
point, we have something that the commissioner that has to be out by 3:30. So
Sure.
if you're amenable to that, at this point, we're just wasting time talking back and forth about
Well,
it. So
but I expressed that I have a commitment where I need to leave here between 1:30 and 2.
okay, perfect. So let's begin so we can move forward as quickly as possible and still give everyone the time they deserve.
So I want to. Stack papers, I apologize. So just by way of an opening, thank you, Commission, for having this hearing. What I think is really important about this hearing and some of the hearings I bring is that I'm sure it gets a lot of you to think about the rules, how they get applied, and so on and so forth. And I think this one will cause you to think as well. I've known Gene Schmidt for some time. I'm a resident of Claremont County. Gene Schmidt is my state representative currently. And I filed this complaint. My first affidavit related to the complaint was filed on the 8th of June in 2021. So just think about how long ago that was. So this has been quite some time ago. And what I want to do as an opening is walk through the actual complaint. So that everybody is well familiar with what was in the complaint, what I alleged in the complaint, and then I'll proceed into witnesses from there. So there's actually 2 versions of the complaint. In the materials I handed out, the page numbers at the bottom, it starts with page 24 is the first, and page 33 is the second. The reason I wanted to have page numbers at the bottom is because, as some of you have observed, even from Mr. O'Brien's file, is that there's sub numbers of exhibits and so forth that could get confusing because you're flipping through a document, you see the same number again. So I'm going to start with the first version, which is the original complaint. And then I'll just briefly cover the second complaint, what was added to it. So I'm going to direct you on that on page 24. First off, I want to direct you first to page 25. Again, I'm going off of the numbers at the bottom of the pages that I gave you. And I'm going to come back. So my allegation is against Ms. Schmidt and or Schmidt for Ohio. You see that multiple times there. Ms. Schmidt and or Schmidt for Ohio failed to. Ms. Schmidt or Schmidt for Ohio may have failed to account for. So I just want to make clear that my original complaint was for the candidate and the candidate committee. For the candidate committee, it's clearly stated within the affidavit itself. Now, let me go back to the beginning of the affidavit, and I'm going to lay out what's alleged in here. So in the 2020 campaign, which we might all remember, the COVID interrupted primary campaign, et cetera, there were 2 candidates in my area that were team householder candidates, Gene Schmidt and Alan Freeman. They had I will prove today that they had a team associated with them of consultants that were helping them with their campaigns. There are 2 of them are referenced in here, RJ Mancini and Stephen Caraway. Those particular individuals never appeared on any campaign finance report. So I established my personal knowledge by researching. First off, I had met RJ Mancini and Luke Householder, which is another person that was involved in this. I had met them by introduction from Steve Caraway at an event in Claremont County at a place called RJ's Taproom and Theater. At that time, those people were working sort of a symbiotic Alan Freeman campaign and Gene Schmidt campaign, two householder candidates in the Claremont County area. Those of you who are involved in, and you'll see it in the exhibits here, those of you that were involved in the Freeman case know that a lot of things were symbiotic. The media placements were done together. They showed up on the same invoices, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll show that in the exhibits here. So when I realized that in the case of Ms. Schmidt, these particular resources, I don't allege here media buys. So those of you might not be familiar, but in the Freeman matter, it had to do with the TV media buys mostly. It involved these resources also, but that was the main thing. And here I don't talk about media buys or television media buys. I talk about the people that were helping Gene Schmidt's campaign, but never showed up on any campaign finance report. And they weren't helping with, like strategic media placement, doing radio ads and TV ads. They weren't doing mailers. They were out in the field helping the candidates, and they were being compensated for that work. I'll prove all that as we get through the hearing today when I present witnesses. So after ascertaining that there was not any, that these costs had never appeared on any campaign finance report, and to this day have never appeared on any campaign finance report, I filed this complaint. So which is kind of funny when you think about it, I filed it back on 8th of June, 2021, and I'm sure you'll hear from Mr. O'Brien and Ms. Schmidt that, they showed a constant content expense. If people aren't familiar with constant content, there were two entities involved with Larry Householder candidates. You've heard of some of them probably in the media. That I'm not going to go to that level. You've got Growth and Opportunity and so on and so forth, and First Energy. But down in the trenches, there were two specific entities. Constant Content, both were controlled by Jeff Longstreth. Constant Content, which is a corporation who was doing basically media things for candidates, and JPL and Associates, which is an LLC that was doing the resources in the field. And those were the two entities that you were seeing on the ground and where the people worked for, where they were connected to, either Constant Content or JPL and Associates. And they were both helping team householder candidates, including Ms. Schmidt. Ms. Schmidt showed expenses for Constant Content, which is part of the exhibits in the second affidavit. She showed expenses for Constant Content, the media arm. She never showed any expenses for either the resource arm, particularly Steve Caraway, who was a consultant to her campaign, and she never showed RJ Mancini. RJ Mancini, just for sake of background, I'll prove and show that RJ Mancini was compensated not by either Constant Content or JPL. He was compensated by the Ohio Republican Party. Okay, he was supposed to be working only with endorsed candidates of the Ohio Republican Party, but he was repurposed to work with only two candidates on the campaign, which I'll prove, Alan Freeman and Gene Schmidt. Neither of which were endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party. Neither of which were endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party in the 2020 primary. So in the first affidavit, there's a set of exhibits that I provided with the original affidavit. Exhibit 1, which is on page 26, was showing that RJ Mancini, who worked as a quote unquote campaign manager or door knocker. You get both definitions, campaign manager and door knocker are apparently synonymous. So that shows that he was being compensated during this entire period by the Ohio Republican Party. Exhibit 2, which again, I established personal knowledge of by doing a lot of research. Exhibit 2 is actually one of Mr. Mancini's pay stubs, because he provided for some discovery. Technically, he didn't have to, but he provided discovery, and within it, he provided pay stubs for his compensated work with the Ohio Republican Party. Exhibit 3, which is page 29. Page 29 is RJ Mancini getting assigned to work on Gene Smith's Facebook page. Okay, and then there's something in this one too, I think, about going to an event to get pictures. So, and this is again, exhibit 3 came from RJ Mancini, who was working with the Schmidt and Freeman campaign. Exhibit 4 is relevant, but it's really not overly relevant to this particular matter at this point. Exhibit 4 is the constant content invoice that showed a series of candidates on it that were team householder candidates, and it's page 30. And that particular thing shows, for example, Brian Stewart. In theory, right now, we have a hearing on Brian Stewart on May 25th. Alan Freeman, you guys, if you weren't here, you were aware of Alan Freeman, and Gene Schmidt. And these were for media expenditures that had to do with commercials, radio, TV, so on and so forth. And I will say, in deference to the Schmidt campaign, they did show, I don't know that one could reconcile it to the penny, but they showed expenses for this. They showed expenses for constant content for these media activities. And then exhibit 5 is people that are working on these campaigns being informed of polling location changes. It's important to know Tom Young and Representative Grandel had nothing to do with Claremont County or our area. This particular email was copied to RJ Mancini and Luke Householder, who again were working of these candidates only with the Schmidt campaign. And then exhibit 6 was, I mentioned that Gene Schmidt had showed expenses. Exhibit 6 is her husband, the treasurer, paying $100,000 of $164,000 expense relating to media to constant content. So that was my original affidavit. So what I asserted, and if you go look at, there's some little differences between the amended one that I can point out that are very simple. And what I hope to prove today is on page 25 of the, again, using the numbers at the bottom of the pages that I handed you, is that Representative Schmidt, you see these failures are in violation of also, or possibly in violation of, sort of in the middle of that page of what happened. 351713 BCD, B, C, and D. Those have to do with filing a complete and accurate campaign finance statement. The distinction between B, C, and D of that statute has to do with whether they are pre-election, post-election, annual, or semi-annual. So those of you that you all know that candidates have to file various reports. The statute that governs that is 3517A, and 351713, and there's different segments of that statute that relate to, and I'll prove without, I don't think any doubt, that the campaign finance reports filed were not complete and accurate. And I also want to point out that my affidavit and the August, I think you said 12th, Mr. O'Brien, preliminary review, that Ms. Schmidt and her campaign have known they've not been accurate. They've known that for years. And I don't believe, maybe they'll make a statement here that they've actually taken some measure to correct that. But I don't think they've taken any measure to correct that. I think I can prove it. The second one there, 351710 D2, is this, that one has to do with the treasurer and the treasurer's responsibility. There's actually no penalty for that one. I think it's in the statutes, but there's no penalty if they don't do it. And then finally, 359903 B1 has to do with acceptance of direct corporate contributions. Just for sake of the commissioners, this particular statute, the other particular statutes don't reference criminal penalties or criminal culpability. This one does. So this is the statute that is punishable by up to $1,000 fine for accepting corporate contributions, or up to 1 year in jail, and or up to 1 year in jail. So that's the statute of this list of statutes that gets into this area of, is there criminal liability involved with the statute? Of course, the commission doesn't make any representation of, you don't have criminal, you're going to throw somebody in the clink, but that's where the kind of things where referrals could come out of them. Because if you found a violation in one of those areas, there could then be a criminal referral associated with this. So That's what I alleged has happened. And as you know, and those of you that are new, I appreciate some of the discussion that happened or newer on this commission. Is this is kind of a unique situation. I think I'll prove all those points. But if this happened, you know, let's pretend something bad happened at your house, somebody robs you. You go to the police. The police get a report from you. The prosecutor files an indictment, figures out what crimes have been committed, and it handles the case. The way this body works, if a private party like me brings something forward, in theory, and this was argued in the Alan Freeman matter, I have to identify to the letter and to the penny what exact statutes were broken up front. Which is kind of peculiar. It's another thing that you should probably address, but I think I'll prove those. To the degree, I'll prove at least the first one. The second one doesn't have a direct penalty. The third one related to corporate contributions, I think that'll come out in the wash. And that has to do with what was reported and what wasn't reported and who actually paid for the expenses. The second affidavit really only had, I direct you to page 34 in that to understand the charges that I put forward. And it says amended edition in big yellow type on there. And it's the only real change of this. It's another exhibit. But what happened was during the course of things, it came to light that Constant Content had a person acting as a collection agent, David Goldstein, to go out and collect unpaid candidate debts relating to Constant Content. And so that's what this is about, what the addition is. And I'm going to flip back here. And there was some new reporting that became available during this time period. So if you look in this particular deck, as it relates to the original complaint, Exhibit 7 is some campaign finance reporting information that I got from the Secretary of State relating to the debt that would be Constant Content at that time. If you remember the first one I showed you, there was a $100,000 check. The total amount was 164, so there was still a debt for 64,000. But most importantly, in this was this additional expense that had to do with David Goldstein. And so if you look in this on one of these pages in here, what happened was, well, by the way, it's also, if I didn't have it in here by accident, it's in Mr. O'Brien's exhibits. But for sake of just an opening, I won't go into the detail of it, is that there was an amount of about $20,000 that was, I guess, billed to Dean Schmidt's campaign by Constant Content by a collection agent, David Goldstein. By the way, this was after all the Larry Householder indictments. Jeff Longstreth was trying to collect past debts through this guy named David Goldstein. That showed on Gene Schmidt's campaign finance report is an amount for $20,000 for David Goldstein. And and as I said, that's in your exhibits. I saw it in your exhibits. If I included the wrong pages here. But that's why there was an amended complaint to draw in that there was this other amount of money that was involved in this. And I think I'll prove conclusively that that payment was for mailers. I'll prove it with his own note to me. That the payment that was made for the Constant Content through David Goldstein was for mailers that were done for the Schmidt campaign. Which brings me back to where I started. The key part of this complaint, what I brought forward, is that there were resources working out in the field that were being paid for and compensated. One by the Ohio Republican Party, one by JPL and Associates, that were jointly supporting the campaigns of Alan Freeman and Gene Schmidt. Those resources to this day have never shown on a campaign finance report. And I think this is pretty important. What's kind of funny is Mr. Richter said earlier on today, mentioned, you know, the kind of cases that typically come before the commission coming from a board of elections, so on and so forth. This is a householder case. Probably going to be more of these, should be more of these. And these process questions for a commission that's existed for how long? On discovery, so on and so forth. These shouldn't be questions at this point. And we should recognize that you have people up here in an organization down to the candidate down here in the organization. And they're all along that way, stuff's not being reported correctly, and it's an abomination of our campaign finance rules. And I'll prove through this hearing that RJ Mancini and Stephen Carroll, those two in particular, were working for the Gene Schmidt campaign. They were being compensated, and they never showed up on any campaign finance report. And I appreciate you taking the time to walk through and understand these complaints and what was in them, because I think it'll be very important for you guys to adjudicate your responsibilities as an Ohio Election Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. May it please, Madam Chairman, members of the commission. I counted as Mr. Hicks was speaking to you all, the name Larry Householder or Team Householder 12 times. This case isn't about Team Householder, isn't about Larry Householder. It's about Gene Schmidt and whether on March 4th of 2020 or June 4th of 2020, she or her treasurer filed a false, inaccurate campaign finance report. Period. That's what this case is about. Mr. Hicks wants to bring in other people and mentioned a lot of other names. His complaint that was filed in June of 21 claims, number one, a man named RJ Mancini was paid by the Ohio Republican Party to work on Gene Schmidt's campaign, and that wasn't accounted for. Well, at least I have in my exhibits an affidavit first from the executive director of the Ohio Republican Party, and that's contained at the rear of my motion to dismiss that I referenced before. And that document is a man by the name of Rob Seacauer, S-E-C-A-U-E-R. And what Mr. Seacauer says in Exhibit 4, I don't have mine separately paginated, but it's an affidavit that he signed back August 10th of 21, 2 days before the hearing in which Mr. Richter recommended this case be thrown out. Mr. Seacauer says in the affidavit, after being sworn, he was executive director of the Ohio Republican Party for 4 years, including this primary period. And he did not, and the Republican Party did not assign Mr. Mancini or any other person to specifically work or volunteer on Ms. Schmidt's campaign. And in fact, one thing Mr. Hicks said is true is because there was no endorsed candidate in that race, they could not, by their bylaw, pay for someone to work on this campaign. So Mr. Seacauer is your executive director saying it didn't happen. Mr. Hicks can speculate. He can say he met somebody in a coffee shop in Claremont County. That does not prove that Mr. Mancini was compensated to work on Ms. Schmidt's campaign. Ms. Schmidt has been running for office for 25 years or better that I know of, and she is a very active grassroots campaigner herself. She goes door to door. She knocks on the door. She doesn't need someone she doesn't know to knock on the doors. And at least I noted just parenthetically, and again, it's in both my exhibits and Mr. Hicks's exhibits, but the pay stub that he presented to you, it says he proved on the campaign. It shows a payment on March 8th of $2,000. The item that he has as Exhibit 1 says on March 8th, he was paid a different amount. So I don't know what this payroll stub is. Apparently it came from Mr. Mancini, but the address for Mr. Mancini on it is in the city of Cincinnati, Ohio, not Claremont County. Number two, I noticed as a former city attorney here in Columbus that there was a city of Columbus deduction for income tax. It would require him to be working in the city of Columbus at the time. While Mr. Hicks says that this pay stub is for him working on the Schmidt campaign in Claremont County. So those discrepancies are clearly indicate that he doesn't prove what he stands up here and tells you he's going to prove. To top that off, I contacted Mr. Mancini right after this complaint was filed against Ms. Schmidt. And I believe it's Exhibit 5 in My packet of information that I gave to you, it's an affidavit from Mr. Mancini about 10 days before that preliminary review the commission has. And on August 2nd, Mr. Mancini said that he was not paid by the Republican Party to work on the March 20 primary on a specific campaign or a specific candidate's campaign, and he was not directed by the Ohio Republican Party or their employees to specifically work or volunteer on the Gene Schmidt campaign for March of 20. So Mr. Mancini says, I didn't work and be paid on this campaign. Mr. Sikar, who's the executive director, other than the chairman, the highest person with that party, says, we didn't direct him to work on that campaign. Surely, I believe Mr. Mancini was paid, but he was probably paid to work on various campaigns. And most of you probably are familiar with documents that might be called a slate card, where maybe there's 15 candidates on it. That's the kind of thing the Republican Party would have an interest in seeing spread out. Why that might indirectly benefit Ms. Schmidt if her name is on it, perhaps. But there's going to be no evidence whatsoever. And Mr. Mancini said, I wasn't assigned to, didn't work for, and wasn't paid to work on Ms. Schmidt's campaign. So that is why, and that would ordinarily be listed as an in-kind contribution to a campaign. It's not money, it's resources, as Mr. Hicks describes it. That would be reported to Peter Schmidt, her treasurer, as an in-kind contribution, and then the treasurer can include that in-kind contribution. And she did report an in-kind contribution from her sister, who held an event for her, and there was some expenses paid for by her sister on that primary campaign that were listed as an in-kind contribution, which is something other than a direct financial contribution, a check made out to her campaign, for example. So we have no in-kind contribution reported them so as to require them to report it. And on top of that, we don't have an in-kind contribution because Mr. Seekauer says, I didn't pay him to do it, didn't sign him to do it. And Mr. Mancini said, I wasn't paid to do it. Now, I think both Mr. Mancini and another person's name that's included in the complaint, Stephen Caraway, because they come from that area, they know Ms. Schmidt, they like Ms. Schmidt, and they may have helped her in one way or another on the campaign. But for an in-kind contribution, it has to be a compensation for it. But Mr. Hicks spends time working against candidates such as Ms. Schmidt. I have not seen his name on Ms. Schmidt's opponent's finance report saying that Mr. Hicks was out down at the Township Hall in Milford, where he includes an email that someone had been asked to attend and take a picture of Ms. Schmidt there. That series of emails you will not see Ms. Schmidt copied on. Again, getting back to her knowledge, is there something that should be reported? Because as you'll hear regarding the constant content information, she reported a constant content debt of $164,000 on her post primary report. It also reflected a payment, and the check is in my exhibits, of $100,000. Her campaign paid $100,000 to Constant Content for media and other campaign consulting. That's fully, completely, absolutely reported, and it's contained on exhibit 7. And so she reported, thank you, Mr. Hicks, and this $100,000 check she reported. And behind that check are the documents from the Secretary of State that show she reported it. And because the balance was $164,000, she paid $100,000 of it. She also reported a $64,000 debt. That's proper. She disclosed it. That's what campaign finance is about, is disclosure. She disclosed $164,000, the Constant Content secured advertising and other campaign consultant work for. She paid $100,000 of it, said, I still owe $64,000. by the next report, the semi-annual report that Mr. Hicks referred to. And again, that is an exhibit there in number 7. You will see behind it that it says a balance of $64,354.31 was paid by her before the next report was due, which was a semi-annual report. The payment date, July 27th of 20. So we have constant content being reported, disclosed, transparent, not hidden, not failing to be accurate and complete. We filed the report showing the debt, showing the payments, and she discharged it before the next report. As to the personnel, be they Mr. Mancini or some of these other people, and I thought the amendment dealt with the other people such as Mr. Caraway and Tommy Rolfe that he claims were being compensated to work up for the campaign. You will not hear one bit of evidence that they were compensated to work on Gene Schmidt's campaign. Mr. Caraway is a longtime friend. She attended his wedding. He's a personal friend. If he did anything to help her, I'm sure it was gratuitous because he supports her. He wasn't paid to work on her campaign. And moreover, those that were listed on that series of emails that are attached, I think, to Mr. Hicks's complaint, you do not see Ms. Schmidt copied on those. She is being advised that anyone is being asked to work on her campaign that might cause her to make an inquiry. I'd like to finish by talking a little bit about Dave Goldstein. Dave Goldstein is a local lawyer here in Columbus, Ohio. He does many things, personal injury primarily, but apparently was engaged in some collection work for Constant Content. And I think what happened was Ms. Schmidt having paid $164,000 to Constant Content, which is a large number for a primary campaign. She thought that all the bills, all the invoices had been taken care of. Right, that's my point. She never got a bill saying you owe more than $164,000 until, and I think the time frame is important, until the summer of last year, the summer of 2022. A collection lawyer named Goldstein sends a letter, not only to Ms. Schmidt, I might add to it, but a whole bunch of other people saying, you owe Constant Content some more money. Well, Mr. Goldstein, upon being contacted, said, tell us why. Mr. Goldstein couldn't tell us why. Mr. Goldstein said, well, my client says that you owe additional money. Having paid $164,000, Ms. Schmidt said, if you can show me I owe you money, I'll be happy to pay it because I'm not a deadbeat. And I want to report it. If the money was spent on my behalf, be it mailings or anything else, I want to pay it. So what did she do? And it's shown in exhibit number 7 attached to my document. Brian Katz is the head in the Secretary of State's office, the campaign finance report. He sent an email. Mr. Katz, or Peter Schmidt, her husband, the treasurer, sent an email saying that Gene had talked to Mr. Katz regarding a disputed debt because Mr. Goldstein never did prove that money was owed, but it was settled, and they agreed to settle it for the amount of around $20,000, and the payment was made, and that was properly reported. That was transparent. As soon as she found out, and she can't report things she didn't know about, as soon as she found out that there was a claim by Constant Content that additional money was paid, owed. Again, you can see an email from Mr. Goldstein to Peter Schmidt with an invoice, a reduced invoice, because they claimed more than that, of $20,260. And then attached to that document is a check to David Goldstein. Mr. Hicks, maybe not here this morning, but has said, well, why didn't it say Constant Content instead of David Goldstein? Because, you're hiding it by writing a check to Mr. Goldstein and reporting it under his name. The Secretary of State, Mr. Brian Katz, told him to do it that way. And that's why that email was there from Ms. Schmidt's treasurer to Mr. Katz saying, tell us what to do. We want to do this right. This is dealing with a February or March of 20 expenditure that we just found out in the summer of 2022 about. Some lawyer writes a letter, we know there were mailings, and we thought they were covered with the $164,000 check we wrote. But apparently, if they're saying there were more, tell us what it is. And Mr. Goldstein provided sufficient other information to show, yeah, maybe there were some more mailings, some more printing costs, some more postage. And so as soon as I became aware of, as Mr. Schmidt says in the email to Mr. Katz, that they paid it. The invoice was dated November 4th of 20, which is the first they knew about it, relating to a March primary, but it wasn't received until August of 21. He amended the 20 post-general report and the 20 annual report and the 21 semi-annual report. So he is not hiding anything. He amended 3 reports with this Goldstein claim from Constant Content, and that is in file with the Secretary of State, which is listed after that document. So at every stage of these proceedings, this woman has held office. She was a member of Congress, United States Congress in the early 2000s in the city of Cincinnati. She has been running for office and filing these reports for a long time, and she knows what the rules are, and she doesn't want to make any mistakes. And so she paid Constant Content as soon as she knew the amount. She listed it as a debt for the balance. She paid that before the next report. And Mr. Mancini and Mr. Caraway and Mr. Rolfe, she has no idea what they did on her campaign. Somewhere along the line, I think Mr. Hicks has some document that says Mr. Mancini says maybe once or maybe twice he did knock on some doors for Ms. Schmidt. Well, was Ms. Schmidt there? Did she get told about it? Did she know he was being paid to do it? Or was he being paid to do it? All those things are speculation and innuendo that Mr. Hicks, who apparently for whatever reason has a personal vendetta against Ms. Schmidt, keeps filing these kind of complaints. And that's why we wanted to have the hearing today. And we think that after you hear everything he had to present and look at those documents that are of public record and file, that you will conclude without us even testifying. And that's why we got into that discussion beforehand. It's his burden of proof. Like it or not, he's claiming there were violations. It's his burden of proof, just like if it was a speeding ticket or a murder case. It's his burden of proof, or in a civil case. The plaintiff or the complainant has a burden of proof. He can't carry that burden of proof based on the documents for you. And so I hope at the close of the case, you'll see those documents and agree with me and dismiss this case. So thank you for your attention.
On my first witness?
Yep.
Dean Schmidt. Call Gene Schmidt to talk.
Sure. Okay. And at least pursuant to a previous discussion, she doesn't believe he's entitled to do this, but she wants to move forward and she's happy to testify and explain what happened about these
Absolutely.
events.
Thank you. You'll have to be sworn in.
Would you like?
Yeah.
Okay. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
How do you want to set this up?
Excuse me.
Where the witness sits, where the,
Why don't you stay at the podium and just let her sit there if that's okay?
for what that I'd like us to use the same decorum we've used in prior hearings.
You know, let's make it so his video can pick her up, while she
Can we
testifies.
stop arguing and just get on with this?
Would you like me to place a chair directly in
Yeah,
front,
we'll
so
put it
you're
there.
kind of face to the commission then?
Just want to make sure so the commission members can hear what the testimony is.
Oh.
You might, when we've done this
No, I
before,
like
like
it.
you rotate this.
See, because they're the ones that need to see my eyes.
I think I also need to be able to see you. So in the past hearings, I just want to be clear here, in past hearings, we usually set the witness up and then have the podium set up for the questioner in a kind of sequence so the commission members can see them and the questioner can see them. So I'd like to have the same actual decorum for how we're running this hearing. We were in the other room before, the bigger room, but Okay, so thank you. Thank you for testifying here today, Ms. Schmidt. I'm gonna start with a set of questions just to establish your background, your knowledge and process, et cetera. But could you state for the record what your full name is?
Jeanette Mary Hoffman Schmidt.
Can you take us through kind of your political experience and history?
Sure, I ran for township trustee. I ran for state representative. I ran for state senate and lost it by 22 votes. I ran for Congress and won. I served 4 terms. I lost that election. Then I decided when this position became available to run for this position.
So would you characterize yourself as an expert in the area of politics in Ohio, campaign finance and other laws based on your extensive
I'm
experience?
not quite an expert. I'm just have some experience.
You have some experience, okay. Do you have experience with the Ohio Elections Commission?
Yes, I've been here before.
Objection, we're here on a case today from March 4th and June 4th, Your Honor, and I see an exhibit relating to a matter of 18 or more years ago, the statute of which has since been declared unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court. So I don't know why that would be relevant here today.
I think we should just stick to what is at hand, please.
I don't think that's a valid objection. All I asked her was, did she have experience with the Ohio Election Commission?
I've answered the question.
That's a very fair question to be asking in this matter.
I've answered the question.
So what has been your experience with the Ohio Election Commission?
Objection again for the same reason. If Mr. Hicks is on a short leash of time, we ought to get to the points.
I'm on a short leash of time for today. So, at some point, but I think this is an important case. And this kind of rush, I don't think it's appropriate. So Ms. Schmidt, can you discuss, your objection could be noted. Okay, but I'd like you to discuss what your experience is before the Ohio Election Commission.
Yeah, an objection if it deals with the case that I referenced to earlier, because that's both irrelevant and since declared the statute that was before the commission unconstitutional.
Can the witness answer the question?
I'd like the chair to rule is what I'd like, Mr. One way or another.
Ms. Schmidt was before the commission on a false statement matter that was pending any number of years ago. The commission made a finding in that case against Ms. Schmidt. I presume that clarifies the circumstance about which you're speaking, Mr. Hicks, sufficiently.
I don't think that's the only time.
There have been several times. I think the most absurd time.
Well, here, why don't you wait till we ask the next one?
No. You want the time. I think the most absurd time was me having to defend the best marathon I ever did in my life. And it's because somebody came before this commission and said, as a woman, I couldn't run that fast and I wasn't wearing a watch. And the commission decided to put it before a full hearing. October of 1993, I ran a 3:19:09 gun time marathon, truly the best marathon in my life. And yet I had to prove before this commission that it actually happened. Because the commission wanted to know what marathons were about. How could I run that fast? There was another time where somebody gave very false and serious allegations against me, and I won that case. I also won the fact that I did run a 3:19:09. So can we move on to the next question?
That wasn't actually the case I was thinking of. So you've volunteered a case that I was unaware of. So that I'm aware of 2006, And I'm also aware of you bringing Mr. Krikorian before the commission.
I
in
just brought that
2009.
up and I won that case.
Okay. In 2006, just by basis of your background and experience with the Ohio Election Commission, what was exactly the allegation and the outcome?
But objective in a 2006 hearing under a statute since declared unconstitutional is totally irrelevant and consuming and wasting time for the matters at hand.
Commissioner, I don't remember all the things of it. The only one I clearly remember is my marathon.
Yeah, you don't have to answer that.
Thank you.
Well, I'm gonna ask another question. When that happened in 2006, because Mr. O'Brien made lots of representations in his opening about Mitch Schmidt's character. He made representations about hearsay representations about various people like Stephen Caraway and RJ Mancini. So if there are things that have happened before this commission that speak to Ms. Schmidt's character and truthfulness and her associations, they are very important to this case. So the question I will ask and seek an object again is, at the time of the 2006 matter, who was your campaign manager and spokesman?
I don't remember.
So I'm gonna direct, and I think I gave this to you, Mr. O'Brien, if you could share it with her. I want to introduce an exhibit, which for me would be exhibits. Since she stated that she doesn't remember.
The unmarked exhibit.
Yeah, it's unmarked, but I'm gonna say what number it picks up with. I think my last regular exhibit was 11. So this would be exhibit, I believe it would be. Oh, no, it isn't. Hold on. I just want to make sure I get the right number. It's gonna be exhibit 14. 14, and it's the one that's an excerpt of in your stacks, commissioners, it's the one that's is a excerpt from a Cincinnati Enquirer article.
Now I'm going to object again. Under a newspaper article is flatly hearsay, number one, and number two, it has nothing to do with these proceedings. And I would disagree. I did not put her character in issue. I said she was an experienced person who ran for office.
This specifically relates to her lapse of memory relating to who was her campaign, who was her campaign manager and her spokesman at the time. The article was intended to clarify her memory.
We're gonna sustain that. We're gonna move forward from this.
Well, I'm gonna want the record to show that Alan Freeman is quoted in the article and was her spokesman and campaign manager at the time. So, and I would advise the commission.
I move to strike his solicitation of comments, as Madam Chairman. He's not entitled to sustain the objection to read the document to which I objected.
All right, let's move forward from there.
So, Ms. Schmidt, you do not remember who your campaign manager and spokesman was in 2006?
I don't know. I've had so many campaign managers. Alan did work for me at one time. It was for a very brief period of time. It could have been then, but I'm under oath. If I can't remember, then I shouldn't be making an assumption.
Okay. Are you taking any medications currently that might affect your ability to remember?
Nope.
Okay. In the past, have you had any issues with memory?
Nope.
What can you take us through? What was your relationship with Alan Freeman over the years?
Objection, her relationship with Mr. Freeman's not relevant for the March 4th or June 4th campaign finance statement.
It's extremely relevant, and that the resources at issue in this campaign are resources that were jointly working on her campaign and Alan Freeman's campaign.
Oh, Madam Chairman, you should prove that rather than asking a question about what her relationship is.
Alan Freeman is not a friend. He's an acquaintance. He lives in Pierce Township. He was part of the Hamilton County Republican Party before he became part of the Claremont County Republican Party. That is how I know Alan Freeman. I knew him when he worked briefly as my campaign chairman for a primary that I had. That was about the last contact I had with him until more recently. But if Mr. Hicks is going to say that Alan and I jointly worked together on a campaign. He's absolutely wrong. And I will tell you, if you know anything about me, I run my own campaign. I run my own race. I door knocked relentlessly on this campaign. I knew the risks that were at stake. I got up at 4 o'clock every morning. I ran 4 to 6 miles a day. I went to mass at St. X downtown at 6 o'clock in the morning. I was out on the streets at 8:30 and I door knocked until the last door, probably about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. I lost a tremendous amount of weight and I did it every day, 7 days a week until March 13th, when the governor shut us down. And then I made relentless phone calls to people asking for their vote. Nobody ran that campaign but me. JPL didn't run it. Megan Fitzmartin didn't run it. Stephen Caraway didn't run it. I ran my own race, period.
So Ms. Schmidt, I just would like the commission to be aware that Ms. Schmidt just went into an oratory about her mass attendance, about her phone calls, about going door to door. And when the commission, I think we should allow a lot of latitude in this hearing. That's why I didn't object to the stuff that's totally irrelevant. So if we're going to allow latitude so that Ms. Schmidt can go into her mass attendance experience at St. Xavier, then we also have to allow latitude for me when I ask the questions.
Which I think we have. So let's move forward.
Okay. So what about your relationship with over time and history with Stephen Caraway? Could you lay that out for us?
Glad to. I met Stephen when he was in high school, when I was in the state legislature 22 years ago, and he wanted to get involved in politics. He helped me on my state Senate campaign as a volunteer. I worked to help him get elected to county commissioner in Adams County. He also worked for me, and when I was in Congress, he was my field rep. He was one of the best howdy and shakers you'll ever meet. He is a very dear friend. I consider him part of my family. I give him his favorite thing is pecan pie. Every year on his birthday, I give him a pecan pie. Every Easter, I give him an Easter bunny from Esther Price. He is a friend. I often joke he is the son I never had. Yes, Stephen helped me on this race, just as he has in every other race. Did he get compensated? He got a pie and a bunny, just like he got throughout the years. He is a friend, Mr. Hicks, and he will always be a friend.
So when it comes to Alan Freeman, how did Alan Freeman and you interact during the 2020 primary campaign?
The only interaction we had was when a group of us, and there were about 7 of us, that did a film together, campaign films. Other than that, we did not interact.
Okay. And what was so just to be clear, you did not attend any meetings or after that filming event, which was to film commercials, I think at your sister-in-law's house, if I remember correctly. You didn't have any interactions with them or meetings with them subsequent to that in that primary?
Meetings with him? No.
Alan Freeman.
Were there meetings that we might have been in attendance together? I'm sure there were. But did I meet with Alan and discuss strategy? Absolutely not.
What about Stephen Caraway? His role in your campaign in 2020 in the
And
primary?
I talk every day. Or just about every day. His role was I would just cry on his shoulder if I had an issue. He was a friend. And that's all he was. Remember, I ran my own race.
Okay, so what, in terms of your actual campaign activities, what was the role of Stephen Caraway? Were there meetings? Could you just characterize what your campaign activities were that involved Stephen Caraway?
We didn't have meetings, but I probably called him every day to cry on his shoulder.
Okay.
You know, just to talk. Frustration of the day, good day, bad day. I do it all the time. We do it now. As I said, we're friends.
So I don't know that I fully understand what his role was in relation to your campaign.
I don't either.
You said you called him. You don't understand what his role was.
What? Mr. Hicks. He's a friend. We talk all the time. I talk to my sister all the time. What was her role in my campaign? What was my husband's role in my campaign? We talked every morning briefly and every evening. My daughter, my best friends. I mean, they're all people that you share information and emotions with. They're
But-
friends. They're friends, Chris. They're friends.
So, but for example, did you discuss strategy for door knocking, for other
No,
activities with
I
Stephen
don't
Carroll?
have my own doors. I got my own list from the Board of Election. By the way, you can get a list from the Board of Elections. They can sort it by super voters or regular voters, households, or streets. And you can check the record with Becky Rudd. I called her up every week for a new list and door knocked that particular area. As I said, I ran my own campaign.
How did you come to be a team householder candidate?
I was gonna run anyway. Yeah, I know what you're getting at, so I'll tell the whole story. In 2017, my family on my dad's side had a family reunion. And my cousin took me aside and said, you need to go back to the legislature. We need you. Now, he has a very important role in Porter Wright. I don't really want to give his name. But he really talked to me and I said, man, my husband's never going to go for this. And he said, well, you need to talk him into it. Short time, a year later, 2018, Larry Householder called me out of the blue and said, I'd like you to run. I said, man, my husband's never going to go for this. My husband came home that night. We had dinner. We're doing dishes. And I said, hey, you'll never guess who called me. He said, who? I said, Larry Householder. He said, he wants you to run for Becker's seat. I said, yep. He said, well, then you better raise the money and you better get your campaign because you know what's at stake. And I said, I will. Then I had a meeting with Larry Householder and he said, we can give you the resources for your campaign, the media resources for your campaign. I would have gone through somebody anyway. And so we used his resources, which I paid for.
What resources were those?
Every check, every the bills that Constant Content presented were the bills that were for my entire campaign, of which I paid.
Were you aware that Stephen Carraway was working for the speaker's organization in that campaign?
There were a lot of,
Objection as to what the speaker's organization is.
JPL and Associates?
Okay.
Objection as to what, that's an LLC that is not, connected in any way, shape or form, Mr. Householder.
That's,
And
yeah,
again, Mr. Householder's, not, on trial here. I think I'd ask, the chair to move.
we're gonna sustain that. There's no way really.
Okay, so I think, I just want to clarify that it is extremely germane to this case that we have two householder candidates that were running together. And we now have a chair that wants to say that anything about Larry Householder is a sustained objection. There was an organization, the people involved in the organization were part of JPL and Associates and Constant Contact. Okay, so me asking questions about those people, and was she aware, for example, that Stephen Carraway worked for JPL and Associates? That's a completely germane question because part of my allegation is that he did work for her as an employee of JPL and Associates that was never reported on a campaign finance report.
First of all, I didn't say that she didn't have to answer anything about Larry Householder. I'm taking each question as it comes. So please don't categorize it like that. I didn't do that. Second of all, she started to answer the question. If you'd like to finish.
I don't even know what the question was. I'm sorry.
And at least,
The
so as
question
not
was,
to have
did you
a,
know that Stephen Carraway was working for the Larry Householder organization / JPL and Associates?
and at least I will, so I don't have to keep interrupting, so we can move it along. I'd like to have a continuing objection to questions dealing with quote unquote team householder or Larry Householder for JPL. That is irrelevant. We have two campaign finance reports that he chose to claim were inaccurate, and that is what the hearing should be about. So I won't object, but anything in that arena, I'd like a continuing objection reflected.
So noted.
Thank you.
I'm sure there were many people working for Mr. Householder. What they did, I'm not quite sure, but I know from past experience, when you have a consultant, they have a team. They don't give you an itemized list of who the team is or what they're paid. They give you a bill and you pay it. That was Constant Content's bill. And I paid it.
But I don't know that my question was, were you aware that Stephen Caraway was working for the Larry Household Organization / JPL and Associates? I don't know that you've answered that question still to this point. Yes or no?
Yes, but I don't know what his role was, and he certainly wasn't assigned to me.
I would like to. I would like to direct Ms. Schmidt and you to look at Exhibit 10. Within my materials.
At least that Mr. Hicks is a transcript of proceedings in the Alan Freeman case for this commission. And I would object, Madam Chair, to the use of the transcript of the Alan Freeman proceeding here in this proceeding. Ms. Schmidt was not present when that testimony was given. I may or may not have been present because I was in and out of that hearing to observe. I certainly didn't have a chance to ask any questions, cross-examine the witness. And I believe it's contrary to the commission rules and contrary to any kind of fair due process hearing that a transcript from another hearing where Ms. Schmidt wasn't present, I wasn't present, I didn't get a chance to ask questions of the witness to be proper here in this hearing.
I would just like to point out that you just a little bit ago put forward an affidavit from R.J. Mancini. Okay, and for purposes of this, my reference to a past public record of this commission is that I'm narrowly using it to purely for truth of contents in what was under oath sworn testimony subject to cross-examination in a very narrow context, specifically relating to a representation that was just made by Gene Schmidt.
I'm trying to figure out what you're looking at.
We wait till Chairman starts out of rule. Now, I was saying in response, Madam Chairman, now, I mean, in the affidavit as Exhibit 5 reflects is specifically authorized and sanctioned by a commission rule.
I would state that since you don't have the opportunity to cross-examine the witness that gave this, that I would sustain that.
So again, I'm just gonna point out that Stephen Caraway in sworn testimony, the only two races he was involved with in Claremont County were Alan Freeman and Gene Schmidt at the behest of JPL. Again,
Wait.
this
stop.
is under oath sworn testimony, and I'm using it in a very narrow way to just establish that one point of Stephen Caraway himself testified. I would have liked to be able to call Stephen Caraway today, but he had a excused absence rather than having to recuse himself in this matter because he was actually working with Ms. Schmidt.
Okay. I've nicely said that we are sustaining that because he doesn't have the opportunity to cross-examine. There's your latitude that you got with going ahead and making a statement after we asked you not to. So can we please move forward?
Was a statement stricken or is a statement in the record?
In the record at this point, but
Yeah. I would not object to his statement being in the record, you know.
Okay, so the statement that under
Okay.
oath, I want to make sure we're clear on what statement's in the record.
You made the statement it's on your recording, it's on our recording. It's time to move forward from that. You made the statement very clearly.
Ms. Schmidt, were you endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party?
Nope,
To your knowledge, do you know why or why not, or was there a process you went through to try to be endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party?
I never went through the process. I wasn't endorsed, nor did I ask for the endorsement.
Do you know who was endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party?
Yes,
Did you say the name of who was endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party?
well, it was Joe Dills, but then he was removed.
Were you endorsed by the Claremont County Republican Party?
No, I was not.
Okay, do you know who was?
Joe Dills.
Okay. Were you aware at any point in time, or did you become suspicious at any point in time relating to your campaign that there were activities taking place that involved surrogates of Larry Householder that were involved in dark money or non-dark money operations supporting your campaign?
I was not aware of any of it.
Yep.
The only time I knew was when flyers came to my door that were not under my authorization. They were under another authorization. That I cannot control. And had I been able to, I would have stopped it because I didn't like what was being sent.
Were you aware of other people making allegations that those things were happening through the speaker?
I don't understand the question.
I would say, were you aware of other people in the district claiming and asserting that those operations were happening through the speaker?
I'm gonna check,
No. I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. Were you aware of it later?
who are these people that were objecting? I will object, this whole line of questioning, Madam Chairman. Some unknown people complaining in a district about flyers on her door,
Mailers, Ron.
mailers, okay.
That- Yeah, I mean, unless you can be specific about people and the time frame, you're just saying later. We don't know when later is. We don't know who the people you're speaking of.
So the primary, let's set some context. The primary was originally what, March 13th or something like that?
March 17th.
March 17th, 2020. It got delayed because of COVID. So at that time, okay, so let's take it in time periods. January, February, March, first quarter of 2020, January, February, March. At any time during that period, were you aware, be concerned, or in any way suspecting that activities were happening without your knowledge, potentially involving Larry Householder?
No,
Objection.
but the answer is no. I wasn't.
Wait until the chair rules on objection. I think the answer is no, but again,
And I believe she answered that. She answered your question the first time.
The answer is no.
That's what she said.
Okay, so I would like to introduce an exhibit for purposes of challenging what she just said in terms of her knowledge, which is the one that is a Claremont Sun newspaper article that I guess if the other exhibit that I had was disallowed, this was the exhibit number 14. And I'm going to ask her to identify people in the picture in that article, as well as some of the comments. So I believe, Mr. O'Brien, you have a copy of this?
is there an exhibit number, Mr. Higgins?
It's a blank one, but it's a Claremont Sun article at the top. Because these are the ones that I added after the original submission.
What's the relation to this case?
Um,
I'm gonna object to the document that it's a non-marked exhibit from the legislation.
all right, so I mean, at this point, if you could please tell us what this is in relation to in your complaint.
Well, let's remember that that I will, okay, the householder operation involved, let me finish.
Well, please answer my question. What?
I'm answering your question if you
Was
let me.
this?
Okay, so the householder operation involved activities, as we've already seen in a federal case that involved discrete activities for campaigns and dark money activities. You've already ruled as much in the Alan Freeman case. You've already ruled as much. So the characters and actors, including some of them that's subject in this, were involved on both sides. She just made the representation that through the first quarter of 2020, she was unaware that there were lots of voices claiming that there were nefarious things going on within the campaigns or within dark money around the campaigns. That is extremely germane because a lot of these resources were involved in both activities simultaneously. Again, as you already ruled before in the Alan Freeman case.
Can you please tell me which complaint this is related to?
This is related to Ms. Smith made the representation to a question I asked that she was unaware of there being lots of voices and so forth, claiming that there were nefarious things going on with how campaigns were happening in 2020 in the first quarter, January, February, March. She said she was unaware. And I want to help to recollect her memory because I live in the same area she does. And this
How does this
article,
relate to the failure to file or include certain information in campaign finance reports, which is what we're here today to presumably find out about?
I think it's going to very clearly establish that there was a pattern of these activities happening on both sides, in the campaign and out of the campaign, involving the same exact resources. And that Ms. Schmidt and others all knew it was going on. Now, ultimately, I can't testify to that. I don't know what she knew and didn't know. But I think if you're going to let her talk about her marathon running and her church attendance, you have to give me a little bit of latitude. How are you going to handle these cases when you get other householder type cases?
But we've asked you to tie it to specific, complaints, and you haven't tied it to the specific complaints.
I think I've tied it again and again,
Okay,
that the same resources, for example, were involved on both sides.
okay.
It's a little hard to tie it when you're preventing me from asking the line of questioning.
I have not prevented you from anything. You've actually asked and most have been answered, even to Mr. O'Brien.
So then I continue.
No, how does her testimony here specifically relate to
Well,
the
I think that
failure to include certain information in
Well,
campaign finance
a
reports?
couple fronts. One would be her honesty. So Mr. O'Brien stated that, she's a great character. And she knows the rules. That was two exact lines from his opening. Okay, so she just said that she was unaware in January, February, March, that there was lots of voices happening, that there was something nefarious going on with the way campaigns were being funded and the resources were being allocated to them and dark money. That is directly relevant on both fronts. One is because some of the resources were on both sides, including some of the resources that tied to the complaint, but also because she's maintained that she knows the rules and she's a great character. But that she was unaware in the first quarter, January, February, March of 2020, that there was any suspicion of nefarious things going on.
Well, we're here and we can only deal with the facts. We can only deal with paper, black and white. We cannot, like, her character is not on any kind, that's not how we deal with things. We don't judge her by her character, or your character, or whoever, Mr. O'Brien's character. We can only deal with what is actually presented to us that proves that she is not done what she said she did, or that she did something. If you have proof that she said she paid something and she didn't, that's what we can deal with. I can't look, none of these commissioners can look at her character. She could be the best person in the world, go to mass every Sunday. That doesn't mean anything. What it means to us is we have to have proof in black and white of what you present or what Mr. O'Brien presents on her behalf. That's the only thing that we can deal with. We can talk about character all day long, but that in the end will not help us make a determination on these complaints.
Well, I think believability and credibility is part of the ultimate legal standard that associates with these particular cases. So part of this is believability and credibility. And, you have in the preliminary hearing, you held that there was probable cause, and I'm looking for something here so I can say the right.
I object to that statement. You did not find probable cause. You said it over for a hearing because
That's what your actual rules say, is what happens in a preliminary review is that you find probable cause to have a hearing.
or you can continue it for a hearing to develop
The
additional
record.
facts.
For the record, I never saw that article. And when you live on 4 and 5 hours a night sleep, you don't get to see the news. I don't get the Claremont Sun. I don't get the Cincinnati Enquirer. So how would I have known about it? But secondly, even if I had heard about it as a candidate, I have got to have I can't have any knowledge of what's going on outside of my campaign. I can only know what I am doing on my campaign. If dark money, which is being used against me now on another issue, is going on, I don't know about it. And there was not just that is dark money going on in my campaign. There was dark money coming from the Joe Dills campaign. And I'm sure Mr. Dills doesn't know anything about it either. So for you to say that A is B and B is C is an illogical argument, Mr. Hicks. I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea that Mr. Householder was in